Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bothell City Council regular meeting for June 3rd. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Well, it looks like we do have a full council this evening. If the council has had a chance to look over the meeting agenda tonight, are there any changes that are requested, or is everybody all right? Councilmember Evans.
Yes, Mayor, I have just an announcement on the RFA public forums that are coming up tomorrow night. So at some point in the agenda, whenever that's appropriate, I'd just like to make the council aware of that. Can be at the end or wherever you want to do it.
You want to do it right after the special presentations, or?
Sure, that's fine. That would be fine. And then the only other thing I was thinking was combining Agenda Bill 1484 and 1485, the discussion. There is some overlap maybe, or I have questions on both, but really that's however you want to do that or however the council wants to do that.
Logistically, I'm happy leaving them separate, but I'm one person up here. Is there any? You're all right with that? Okay. Any further? Councilmember Lamb?
I'd like to add an executive session to discuss personnel matters at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Sandberg.
I'd like to add 20 minutes to Agenda Bill 1484 regarding City Hall.
Great. Rayam? Good? Everybody's good? All right. Projected agenda. Everybody have a chance to look at that? Yeah.
One on the projected agenda, I think the study session regarding the proposed plan and code amendments for the Fitzgerald sub-area was originally scheduled in June, but I see it's been pushed back to the July 8th date, which is fine, but if there's any residents that are interested in that, just make them aware that that will be delayed a month, and I know staff is coming back at that point with some input on that.
Okay. Anybody else comments about the projected agenda?
Mayor?
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I will be unable to attend the July 1 meeting.
We really don't have much on July 1, do we? Haven't we canceled that years past?
The projected agenda actually is subject to council cancellation or confirmation.
Well, let's make a firm decision right now. I'm certainly in favor of canceling the July 1st meeting. I see several heads nodding. So that's a unanimous decision to not meet.
Also, Mayor, I wanted to raise, we only have one matter at this point in time scheduled for the June 10th meeting, and that's not necessarily a time-sensitive matter, and it could be delayed to a future meeting if council so desires.
Is it possible to move everything from the June 17th meeting earlier, or is that logistically near impossible? June 17th.
I think that would be difficult for a lot of those items to move earlier. What about the Fitzgerald sub-area?
Yeah. Fitzgerald sub-area, is that too impossible to put on the June 10th
Again,
meeting? And what was the reason for the delay? Jerry?
It's turning out to be it's a very complex issue, and in particular in light of the 39th Avenue discussions. Mm-hmm. So our hope was to bring it to you in June, but it's proving to be more complex than we even thought. So I think really July 8th is the soonest we could probably do a complete job with that.
Okay. Well, I'm fine not meeting on June 10th because we really don't have much there. How does everybody else feel about that? Yeah, Councilmember Evans.
And that's fine. I just wanted to ask quickly the city manager on if we do cancel the July 1st meeting, Do you foresee things that you would have scheduled for that date, or is there a problem in canceling for that?
No, we haven't scheduled anything for that date, anticipating that that might be a problematic date with holiday schedules.
Great. Well, I would be in favor of canceling those two meetings if that's consensus of the council.
Councilmember Sandberg?
Were you talking about canceling the June 10th meeting as well?
That's right.
And then when would we schedule that study session on densities in downtown transition district 2?
Potentially the 17th, because we only have an hour and 45 minutes of items. It looks long, but a lot of it's on consent.
Oh, I see. Okay, well.
You all right with that?
Yeah, if we don't have that much to do for the 10th and not as much on the 17th, that makes sense.
Great. So it looks like we'll do that as well. So the government that meets less does less damage. It's a positive thing. All right. Everything else looks adequate, and we're off for the month of August. Councilmember Ayan.
I have something I'd like to add to the projected agenda.
Okay.
And then to follow up on another projected agenda item I was interested on, the easy one first would be the sign, Welcome to Bothell for a day or a lifetime. We talked about that, and it was supposed to come back to council, so it'd be nice to have that come back. And then the other one I'd like to add is a study session item to do a 6-year projection of our operational general fund budget. With that, it would be nice to get an overview of our debt capacity and where we're at with if the city hall passes, and as well as if the levy passes. The just a little bit of detail on the overview of our operating budget that I'd like to hear about is funding for road preservation, such as overlays and traffic calming, sidewalk programs, pedestrian safety program, the park asset replacement program, road maintenance, such as pothole repair and striping, and then vegetation maintenance.
Okay. Are others in favor of having a 6-year
Can
general
I ask a
fund
clarifying
budget?
question? So are you looking for the entire budget or simply those items? Because those make up a very small fraction of our general fund budget. Are you suggesting that our focus would only be on those items, or that you want to discuss our entire general fund budget over a period of 6 years?
So these ones are specifically of interest to me. I wouldn't mind other people adding things to it. I guess not going over the entire budget is totally.
Do you see that as
necessary.
being distinct from the capital facilities plan, as well as the upcoming sort of budget discussions that we're having, or potential amendment? Or how do you see those two intersecting?
Well, the capital budget would be totally separate. This is just the general fund operating budget.
So you want it to have a sort of a parallel process to what we do with our capital facilities plan for our general fund budget. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, because capital facilities plan or capital budget, so that's different than your operating budget.
Got that.
Okay.
But I guess what I'm trying to understand is you mentioned 3 sort of discrete items from within the general fund. And is what you're hoping on the council discussion is that we would say sort of a tutorial, like here's our general fund expenditures, here's where we see them projected out over 6 years, here's where the items that you're interested in are featured, and here's where the items that other people might be interested are featured, just kind of like an overview of the budget for 6 years?
Yeah, and then and to have some assumptions, obviously, because projecting 6 years out, we have to make some assumptions about what
quite
kind
a
of
few.
revenues we would project would be available. But these ones specifically, because I feel like these have been reduced or removed entirely from our operating budget. And what we've heard quite a bit is that the revitalization of downtown will replenish a lot of these programs that I think are important to the public. And I just would like to know kind of what is the game plan for, what is the horizon in the next 6 years of them coming back?
So
I'd be interested to hear from staff on their thoughts.
staff members who definitely want to talk on that. Who's first, Tammy? Or
So I would say that these are all topics that will be discussed as part of either the CFP or the upcoming biennial budget development discussions that we'll hold with council. And I would encourage council to, if to the extent that you're willing, to sort of have those discussions holistically and not kind of separate out some matters of the budget out of context from the entire general fund or the entire capital facilities fund. So those are all topics that we discuss every 2 years, in some cases annually when we do a mid-biennial budget adjustment. And so I would encourage council and advise you to simply wait for that process to occur later this year, which will be following your break,
Okay.
rather than schedule something early now.
Tammy?
Thank you. Every budget cycle, the council puts together their desired goals for the ensuing 2-year period, and that's where you would say the council would come together and decide that during the next 2 years, and it can go forward. A lot of them have went forward multiple years or multiple bienniums. So that's where council basically gives staff the direction that this is what we'd like to see included within the city manager's recommended budget that comes to you. And so I would recommend that that's how that got added to the budget process.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else want to make a comment on it? Councilmember Sandberg?
So this budget review process will start after the August break. Is that correct?
Well, by law, I deliver a budget. Well, the capital facilities plan will start sooner. I can't remember the dates that we've scheduled that to come to council, likely sometime in September. The committee will be meeting prior to that. But by law, I deliver a budget to you in November. We've tried to deliver that to you in years past, earlier than that, in October, so that we can start those discussions.
And then, as a part of that budget discussion, then we could have what Councilmember Rayum is asking for is a discussion of a 6-year projection of revenues and expenditures, kind of like we do a 6-year projection on the capital facilities plan. Is that
Yeah, that's incorporated into the general fund discussion that when we present that to you. And prior to that, as the finance director mentioned, I facilitate a discussion with council about your budget outcomes and desires. And so from a policy perspective, you can provide direction in terms of what you might want to do different from what we've done in years past.
So do you feel like you're getting response on the direction that you asked for?
Yeah, September's fine. But it would be nice to have a more in-depth discussion. I was here at the last. I've only been involved in one budget setting process on council, and it would be nice to have a little bit more interaction, I guess, than the last time.
Are you on, I can't remember, are you the capital facilities?
I'm on the capital facilities plan.
There you go.
Yeah.
You get a good
That's
amount
not
of
what
detail.
is worried.
That's not as much. All right.
Yeah, a lot of these aren't.
I guess what I'd encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about what we've done in years past, is simply review the budget document, make an appointment with the finance director or I to sort of go over the status of the 6-year operating funds. And that'll give you some basic background information, which I suspect you're seeking, more so than waiting for the council deliberation, which is going to happen later in the year.
Thick book. Director Shackman.
One of the reasons that we have to wait until September is we have to have our revenues projected. Revenues are not ready to make the determination of what's available, what resources are available to allocate. So council will actually get that information along with making decisions as to what what their desired outcomes are for the 2-year budget period and going forward. So once those revenue projections are available, then we're able to help you more with how to utilize those. Whether we're looking at actually a decrease or an increase or...
One second. Councilmember Evans.
Just quickly, I was going through my desk today, and I found on my desk the 2013-14 budget status report, quarter number 4. And I looked through that, and there may be some of that information in there that you give us quarterly, kind of the status of things and how revenues are coming in and that type of thing. So in relation to this item tonight that we'll be discussing in City Hall, I'm interested in how we stand in our reserve account, how our funds are growing there. I think that's a factor in our bonding and those types of things. So I would agree it would be good to look at this on a 6-year level, and if we can do that in September as part of our budgeting process, that'd be great. In the interim, there is quite a bit of information available through the finance director on kind of our quarterly status of things, is my understanding.
The quarterly reports are vital. They give, basically, the council's goals for the year can be included within the quarterly report so that you know how spending is, how revenues are, you know exactly what the fiscal position of the city is. The reason we can't give you information prior to the 3 years is because we have a 2-month lapse on sales tax, which was one of our largest revenue streams. So it really takes 3 months before we're able to give you, you know, each quarterly report. So we're always a little bit behind, but reading those documents, they pretty much flow like a book. It takes, you know, one period and you pick that up, and in the next cover letter or executive summary, it starts from where the last one left off and goes forward. So it really keeps everybody abreast, including staff, because we put those online, where the city is overall in each one of their funds, and if we're meeting our budget projections and our strategies for projects and that type of thing. So
Sounds like it's coming back in September. Good. Thank you. Any other comments on the projected agenda? Anything we'll see missing? Great. Well, I have a proclamation to read, so we're going to come down to the podium there. All right. Good evening. Well, I have a presentation to make to the Bothell Chamber and President of the Chamber and also Cascadia Community College. Eric Murray is here. I'm going to present this to you, Eric, and I'm going to do my best to read through it. Since you're a professional educator, don't judge my grammar. So this is a City of Bothell Proclamation, Greater Bothell Chamber of Commerce Week. Whereas the Greater Bothell Chamber of Commerce works with Bothell businesses, merchants, and industry to advance the civic, economic, industrial, professional, and cultural life of our city. And whereas the City Bothell Chamber of Commerce provides leadership and support to our businesses, professional, and community organizations by promoting and fostering the business and economic climate of our community, ensuring that Bothell continues to be a great place to live and work. And whereas this year marks the 10th anniversary of the Greater Bothell Chamber of Commerce, and whereas the Greater Bothell Chamber of Commerce is a great partner and a friend of the City of Bothell. Now, I, therefore, Joshua Freed, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim June 15th through June 22nd, 2014 as Greater Bothell Chamber of Commerce Week. So thank you, Eric. Thank you. Appreciate it. You have a few words to share? Okay. There you are.
Thanks very much. I did sign up. You can tear up my yellow sheet because I didn't know when I was going to get to say a few words. Thanks very much. We appreciate you proclaiming the week coming forth as the Chamber of Commerce Week. It's nice to bring one of those bright moments to the city and to the city council when things really actually do work. This Chamber of Commerce is celebrating its 10th birthday, its 10th anniversary. We've been working diligently, I think, over the last decade to help connect the city and businesses and provide an environment where businesses can network together. We went from a small downtown association to over 275 members today. I think that's an accomplishment about the networking that we provide. As well, we appreciate the relationship we have with the city, from Bob's presence on the board to the monthly updates to the fact that the city has a presence at our committee meetings, and that we are also a conduit for making sure that you hear the voice of our community, both across the freeway, North Bothell, and here in downtown. So we very much appreciate the relationship we have with you. I want to take a moment to introduce about half of our board is here tonight. So we have John Huggs, Shauna Pitts, our Executive Director, Lori Cadwell, Brian Mills, Lan Jackman, Roger Cecil, and today, is anybody else here? So a good number of our board came out today to express our thanks for proclaiming that week in honor of the Chamber. And I would also like to invite you in the middle of that week at Cascadia is our open house. It's from 6 to 8, 5 to 7. We hope that you'll stop by. Many businesses will be there showing off their goods. And not only will we have wine and food, but some of the other businesses that are not in the food and beverage industry will be there as well, trying to demonstrate what they have to our city. So thank you again for the proclamation. Thank you for being good partners, and we're glad to be a part of the City of Bothell.
Eric, thank you so much. Thank you, and for the board, and Lori, and others that have been a great resource for businesses in Bothell and to buy Bothell. It's huge for our economy. All the planning we've been doing for downtown is a significant part for you. So excited that you've been part of that. Great. So we're going to follow up with the RFA announcement. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you, Mayor. the council is aware that we're studying a proposal for a regional fire authority in that area. There's North Shore Fire District, Woodinville Fire District, District 10, and the City of Bothell are looking at this potential of forming a fire authority in our area. We've been meeting now for probably 6 months. Councilmember Spivey and Councilmember Agnew and myself are on a committee with commissioners from the fire districts. And there's been a lot of research, a lot of collection of data that has the consultant. We have a consultant helping us, and he's collected a lot of data for us. There is a public forum coming up tomorrow night here in Bothell. There was one, I believe, Monday night in North Shore, in Woodinville, and the other one Tuesday night tonight is in North Shore area, and then ours will be tomorrow night. And the purpose of this is I think there was an email that came out to you that showed people who had been invited to this. It was the attendance was the consultant recommended, rather than just opening the doors wide open, which we certainly will do further on in the process, that he recommended that we invite a cross-section of people. I imagine some of the people here from the chamber tonight have been invited to that meeting tomorrow night, but he will be presenting the findings to date of where they've analyzed the different community or agencies and things, and we'll be reporting that. He'll be asking for input from the committee on or from the forum on priorities in fire service and that type of thing. So it'll be a good working meeting for this group. Our Fire Chief Van Horn will be there and make about a 15-minute presentation, just kind of giving an overview of our current fire service, and then he will leave, and it really will become just a forum for the citizens to express or receive information and express input at that time. So each one of these forums has occurred and will be the last one to occur, and then later on in the process, it will again be opened up again for general meetings across all the agencies and additional public input. So the consultant recommended that fire commissioners and city council members not attend that meeting tomorrow night, to keep it a kind of a free flow, and maybe that we don't control or have an influence on the dialogue. They want that as an open dialogue for that forum. And so I just wanted to report and recommend as council members that we don't attend that meeting. That's one meeting we don't have to attend, so that's good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Sandberg?
Yeah, thank you for announcing that, Councilmember Evans. Was that meeting publicized on our website?
No, it's an invitation-only meeting, as you know.
So it's not then open to the public? I guess I'm confused.
Well, they're calling it a public forum, but the forum group was by invitation to invite a cross-section of people from the community. Those invitations went out. That group will work as a group in discussing and receiving information, and it's not that the public can attend, but the discussion is going to be defined to that group that's there and has been invited to the meeting.
So does your announcement tonight make a general invitation? So say if members of the public were interested, they could come and attend and listen, or not?
The main purpose of my announcement tonight was to just briefly give the council an update on and ask you not to attend that meeting tomorrow night, so
Okay.
that there's a free open dialogue. So that
Council should not attend.
Right.
Okay.
And fire commissioners and
And fire-
all the other people and that type of thing.
Potential
So
decision makers, but members of the public could.
there will be additional meetings for the community down the road, public meetings that will be open to everyone. This is more of a study group at this point, but
Okay.
they're not going to lock the doors on anybody that
All
does
right.
want to come in.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rayam?
I just have a quick question to Councilmember Evans. Did who developed the group list?
The consultant worked with or recommended to the committee types of people that he recommended be invited to or being considered to attend this meeting, and that was a cross-section of the entire community, from other consultant or other studies he's done. That was his recommended approach. So I believe a lot of those names came from people who've been interested or people who in the community we know that would be interested, that type of thing. So it was just a collection of names from people, leaders in our community, that citizens that have expressed interest in just to be involved.
But it was the RFA committee, was the committee that selected the name, or
The RFA committee worked with the individual staffs for the North Shore Fire District and Woodinville Fire District and Bothell to come up with a list of names, and that list generated the almost 79, 80 names from Linwood, or from Bothell.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, moving on. Thank you, Councilmember Evans. It is a visitor section of which we ask for folks from the public to come and address the council. We have 3 minutes limited per speaker. I do have some sign-up sheets here. First on the list is friend of the city of Bothell, Jim Freeze. Jim, you're up.
Thank you. Jim Freeze, 20218 108th Avenue Northeast. Most people in Bothell probably know me nowadays for conservation work with Friends of North Creek Forest. But I also have 40 years experience in the construction industry. I've been involved with every kind of construction, every aspect of it, and every trade. And so tonight when I want to talk about a City Hall, I would do it when you're talking about it, but I'm supposed to be hosting a dinner for our interns tonight, so I got to run out of here. Anyway, I don't think there's anybody in Bothell that I met that doesn't think we need a new City Hall. Our old noble City Hall has seen better days, and it's starting to look like the Alamo. And we got people in city government and, trailers behind the old library, and it's just, biding time to get this thing done. I think everybody's in agreement we need one. There is a respected but minority opinion that it should be smaller, and I want to underline respected. I really think it's important to consider these things. I don't think it's a quality issue that is there any resistance. Vulcan is involved, and believe me, I think they are probably the best you could have chosen. They have a stellar reputation. My concern is if we build it too small, if we build it to just fit what we have now, what we need now, I'm wondering what's going to happen in 20 years. I've looked at our urban growth boundary, and I know Bothell is going to grow. It's going to grow a lot in 20 years. What about 30? The best example, I can cite a lot of them, but the best example I can think of that most everybody probably knows about is the Kingdome. Everybody wanted to build it cheaper. Everybody wanted to hold the budget. And when they built it, even as young as I was in construction then, I thought, my God, what are they thinking about? In 23 years later, they blew it up. They demolished that thing because it just didn't fit what we needed. So, I would urge you to take the stretch now, go for the whole budget. I'm sure in 20 years people are going to be we'll be using the whole thing way before then. And as far as it lasting a long time with the quality that I expect in that kind of construction, it's going to last a long, long time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Freeze. Appreciate it. Mr. David Habelwitz, we have your address already. If you come up to the podium, thank you so much.
I see someone has a yellow form. Were they supposed to give it to you?
Yeah, we can grab it,
Give you
or when you come up to speak. Yeah, we'll just get in a second. Thanks.
3 minutes?
That's correct. The little light in front of you will go off red, and we have no shocking devices. We treat you kindly.
You say that now. The cameras are on, yes? You're planning on spending every last dollar of our REIT money, as I understand it, on this grand Tajma City Hall. If the projected earnings do not outperform all historic earnings, then the city could go bankrupt. You mentioned that this was put up to public review, and I challenge that to that point because the council never made a request for public comment open to all residents. that's probably going to get railroaded through anyway, so I'll move on to the other and more important issue that I have right now, and that is, I would like to comment regarding your impromptu decision last meeting to forego including a description of visitor comments in favor of just listing their name and the subject they commented on. First, the content of videos is not searchable on the web. Only text is searchable. Second, and far more important, is this. Prior to the November 20th, 2012 City Council meeting, then Mayor Mark Lamb was in the news when it was reported that he had an extramarital affair for over a year with his secretary at his law office. I came to that meeting to ask the council to appoint a new leader for the City Council under the premise that if he cannot honor the sacred oath made to his wife and children, how could he be trusted to manage hundreds of millions of dollars in public money? However, the mayor had the cameras turned off for the entire visitor comments section of that meeting because one speaker requested to be anonymous. This was unprecedented. As a result, there is no recording of public comment on that issue. Furthermore, it was stated by then Mayor Mark Lamb that the audio portion would still be recorded. Yet that portion is also missing from the meeting archives. Without the comments included in the meeting minutes, the council has the ability to completely erase all history of public comments at will, simply by turning off the cameras. In this case, there was no record whatsoever of any of the dozens of citizens who came to speak out against the mayor continuing his position in the council. It is in the best interest of all parties that this information be included in the meeting minutes. That is precisely why we have meeting minutes, and for the occasional inconvenience of making corrections in the minutes, it is well worth the effort. This is your job. Thank you.
We didn't shock you. We all listened. All right, the next on the list is Mr. Sharon Mittelman. We have your name, sir, and your address already. Thank you.
Hi. I'm part of the streets that were annexed to Bothell in the last few months, and when you asked us if we want to join Bothell, you suggested that we'll pay less taxes and get more services. In the last few days, I got a postcard in the mail basically saying, we need more money from you. I understand that this is because you're going to spend about $50 million on the new city hall and some other budgets, so you are running out of money and you need more money to roads. When I spoke with my neighbors, all of them said, we're going to vote on the city hall, and as far as I understand, we are not going to vote. Nobody asked us. And I spoke with a dozen of people, and all of them were very surprised that nobody asked anybody about any of the projects other than once you allocate all the money to the project that you are going to decide on your own, now you are going to ask us pay more taxes. So I understand that we might need this city hall or some other projects, but I believe that we should be asked, or at least tell us exactly what's going on, and so we can decide what we need to do. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, sir. Next on the list is Lilia Bernal. I don't know if I said that correctly. If you want to correct me, that would be great.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm here on behalf of my daughter who work at Mercer Island, and I go every day with her just to help her to use the carpool. So when I come back, take the bus from Mercer Island to Bellevue, from Bellevue to Lingwood from UW and Cascadia, and then I take the 238 to come home. So I beg you that don't cut the road buses, because otherwise, how can I help my daughter? That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, ma'am. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to address council this evening? I have all the oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. If you just state your name for the record, that'd be great. Yeah, up there at the podium.
My name is Xiahua Wei from University of Washington, Bothell School of Business. Tonight, I would like to express my concern over the new City Hall building. $15 million on a new City Hall building. That sounds a great idea. But how about taxpayers? Are you excited about this proposal? Let's do the math first, because I'm an economist. In the city of Bothell, we have 35,000 residents. So $50 million means that every one of us has to pay $1,400. As a new resident in Bothell, I'm not so excited about this idea. And as an economist, I'm a firm believer of free market. And I believe that the justification for the existence of a government is that it provides public goods and services that which can be underprovided in a free market. And it should provide equality and efficiency to the society. So I was very surprised when the city council proposed to build a $50 million building. And I think that every budget has a limit. That's why we need to prioritize it. And to me, there are many other things I would like to pay this $1,400. So that include education, transportation, the safety of the community. All those things can go before the new city hall. If the proposal is passed, maybe in a few years, we'll see a grand fancy building in downtown Bothell, which can be a great attraction for our city. But we are going to see a continuing escalation of our tax. And that's why tonight, I would like to call your attention to this proposal. And I would like to invite you to say no to it. Because we want to take control of government spending. And we want to make our community a better place to live.
Okay, thank you. I do have another sign-up sheet that at the top, Cindy, you are not wishing to address the council at this time, is that right? You're for AB 1484? Okay. For the City Hall. Okay, great. Any other comments from the public this evening? Mrs. Henderson, come forward and state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Lee Henderson. I own Alexis Cafe on Main Street, and I live at 10706 Valley View Road in downtown Bothell. I have been a business owner in downtown for 23 years. I have watched, let's say this, I have seen a lot of proposals of growth, and I've watched very few. We are now in the heart of growth. I feed people for a living, so I have a dog in this fight. But also, I have raised my children in this area and gone to the schools, and I've also, just been a community activist and a volunteer on many, many things. So this is a very important part, a piece of what we're showing the state, because we are like the most, we are growing at such a rate that people can't believe it. We grew in the worst of economies, and they couldn't believe it. I am also a citizen that is an activist for the bond to finish all the projects, as you know. And the money for City Hall is not a tax base proposal. This is not going to affect your taxes. It's not part of the bond. So I just wanted to clear that up. Anyway, I stand in favor of it. I hope you support it. I want to see it happen. On a side note, how many years? 1938 was when City Hall was built. And I have a book at home called The History of Bothell, and I looked through it to see if all this conversation was going on in 38, because it was all about all this politics, and it wasn't. It wasn't going on because they would have put it in that book because, people care. So anyway, I stand in support. I'd love to tell you I stand in support for the business community, but I can't. It's just me. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. Ms. Gwen, if you come forward and state your name for the record.
I wasn't going to speak now, but so many people had, I thought I'd just throw my comments in. I actually caught your beginning discussion regarding a 6-year budget, I believe, projection. And I went on the city's website in the Finance Department webpage and pulled up the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2012. The finance director wrote a letter to mayor, council, and citizens of the city of Bothell, June 30th, 2013. And on page 4 of that, I'll read the part that applies to City Hall and the discussion about a 6-year projection. Long-term financial planning and management measures. Bothell assesses plans for future revenue inflows and expenditure outflows through a variety of fiscal management measures, such as, first bullet, managing future fiscal risk by utilizing a 7-year budget modeling system that simulates a constant state of revision based on the latest, most likely economic assumptions. Budget modeling provides city management an opportunity to analyze revenue inflows and expenditure outflows, as well as the long-term impacts of present-day decision-making. I am wondering why you don't have this tonight, because I looked in the staff report because I wanted to know more about the City Hall. And I didn't see the projections. And if council up there doesn't have these type of projections now, City Hall's not being added now as a tax. However, it is an expenditure that is long-term and ongoing, and you will need revenue for that, and you're using the REIT funds. I would just like to see that projection to know whether or not I support the City Hall. From what you provided, the fiduciary responsibility of council is to look at that. Because are you making decisions now that will impact citizens' budgets in the future to a point where they can't live in Bothell? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that'd like to address council this evening? Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. I didn't. Oh, that's all right. You come out to the podium. You have 3 minutes. If you could just state your name for the record, that'd be perfect.
My name is Terrence Bedford. I'm a resident here in Bothell, and I feel very privileged to live in Bothell. I think it's a great community. I'm especially proud of my daughter, who recently graduated, a couple years ago, graduated from Inglemoor High School, and was able to get into a very, very good, well-known university. So she's getting a great education. So when I first arrived here tonight, I was somewhat against the building of the new City Hall, but here we are meeting in this small room. So I guess my views have changed somewhat. I think it is a good idea that we should have a nice City Hall, but I also would just like to encourage to really focus on the priorities. It took a while to get here, so I think traffic is important, and making sure that we're doing everything possible to make sure that we can get to and from Bothell. That would be great. I also think that it's really supporting education, incredibly important, and making sure that we're not losing focus on that. And then also, it seems like we've taken on quite a bit with the revitalization of Bothell. So again, we'd really love to see that continue. And then once we're reaping the benefits from that, then I think it's a time to say, okay, great, we're getting revenue, we're making progress, things are really vibrant. Now it's time for us to build that facility because we've got the revenue to support that and to make sure that we don't get in debt and then cause other problems down the road that make it more difficult for us to provide the resources and so forth that we need to maintain this great community. Thank you very much. Again, thank you, sir. Terrence Bedford, Bothell, Washington.
Good deal. Go Vikings. Oh, class of 92. 81? Perfect. We still love Bothell. Does that complete the visitor section? All right, seeing no more hands, we will move on. Consent agenda is next. No items were pulled. Is there a motion to balance?
So moved.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Lamb, second by Councilmember Agnew. If everybody could place their vote. And the clerk can display. Passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is AB 1483, to consider award of solid waste contract. I saw Sabrina in the room. Sabrina, nice to see you again.
Hello. Just going to keep this simple. So, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Sabrina Combs, the Recycling and Public Services Project Administrator, and I'm returning to Council per your direction to speak about the solid waste contract and the potential contract with Recology Cleanscapes. So we were requested by Council to look at finding additional savings or reductions in the rate that they had provided as part of their proposal when we were negotiating the contract. That amount So this is the chart I've shown before. The original proposal was for 3.58% increase. Recology Cleanscapes did provide a letter that was in your council packet that reduced that to a 2.46% increase. And as you can see, this chart, which I've shown before, highlights the different levels of service for residential and commercial, as well as providing those rates and that change in rates. Additionally, to further explain that, here are the 32, 35-gallon cart for weekly service and the, sorry, it's a little low. And the comparison of the two rate options, as well as additional information comparing us to other cities in the area. I did modify this graph to show the inclusion of the service providers for those areas. So, for instance, Bellevue and Kenmore are provided service through Republic Services. Kirkland receives their service from Waste Management, et cetera. So, with that information, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you might have related to this from myself or Recology Cleanscapes, who is here to answer questions in regards to the letter that they provided with that option.
Thank you, Ms. Combs. Does anybody have any questions? No? Councilmember Evans.
I had a couple quick questions. I appreciate the clarification on the 10% that was in our letter from Kevin Kelly. Is Kevin here tonight?
He is.
There he is. Okay, great. I appreciate that, and if I understood the letter correctly, this had to do with operational assumptions that was based on our model for our city and the budget and that types of things, and the longer drive from Bothell rather than Shoreline to back down to Seattle, that type of thing. So I appreciate that. It did state that the rate structure that creates an additional risk on Recology, and I guess in the letter it talked about, it makes that statement that one specific accommodation made at the city's request was adopting a rate structure that creates additional risk on our company. And then it goes on to say we provided the city with rates that are competitive, significant enhancements and things. So when you say, and maybe this is a question Mr. Kelly could answer, when you say additional risks, are those the things that you followed up in that sentence with significant service enhancements, that type of thing, or are there additional risks that Recology is taking based on this?
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity and for reviewing the letter. That refers to the rate structure in the request for proposals. It was requested that proponents respond with a true cost of service model. Mm-hmm. So you say how much it costs to do a certain type of service. The city of Bothell already has a rate structure in place that is not cost of service. And so what we did is we adapted the current cost structure to limit the impact to all customers throughout the city. So we did that at the city's request, and one of the reasons why that creates additional risk is because we are doing that to the benefit of a residential population that's growing faster than a commercial population.
Okay. Great. I appreciate that information. And apparently this reduction was based on, new containers, not changing out all the dumpsters, but revitalizing some of those containers. And there's a savings in that. That's why you came back with the difference here. Is that still a feasible approach for you folks in not purchasing all new dumpsters, but being able to renovate some of them?
We think it is.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
So no further questions. I just want to give the last chance, because once we have a motion on the floor, we're not going to be asking questions to staff.
Make a motion. All right. Mr. Mayor, I would move the recommended action.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to speak to my motion if I can.
Please do.
So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our staff and to thank Cleanscapes for the work that we've done. It was brought to my attention actually by my wife that I'd referred to this sometimes as a monopoly contract. And she said, you shouldn't say that because it makes it sound like it's bad. And she was like, it's actually a good thing that we require everybody in our city to have garbage service because otherwise it's gross. And I said, I agree. And I remember when we were going through the annexation conversation, that was one of the issues that there wasn't really a good rebuttal for. Somebody in the annexation area said, I currently burn my garbage in my yard, and if I come into the city of Bothell, I won't be able to burn my garbage in my yard. And I said, that is the one argument against annexation for which I have no rebuttal. You are correct. You won't be able to burn your garbage in your yard. But the point that I think that's to get at is that we on the council are put in the place of negotiating on behalf of the citizens because this is a private contract that we approve. This is our only opportunity to negotiate it. And I think that the conversation that we've had here as a council has made this contract better. And I appreciate my colleagues on the council who supported taking a second look at this, and I appreciate the good faith that Cleanscapes has showed in taking a second look. And as a result of that, we have contract savings that will put $360,000 into the pockets of citizens in the city of Bothell because of the changes that we made. And I appreciate that. We as a council had a very strong discussion. And we as a city in our negotiations with Cleanscapes had a very strong negotiation and a very good negotiation. Tonight, we come together as a council and as a city and approve this contract and celebrate the fact that Cleanscapes will be our provider. And I just want to thank again our staff, my colleagues on the council, and our new hauler Cleanscapes for what I'm sure will be a good relationship in the years to come.
Anybody else? Councilmember Sandberg?
I'm also going to be supporting the motion. I too want to thank staff and Recology Cleanscapes and council for all the work we've done. I think that when you look at that table, it's really reflective of everybody's hard work to bring the lowest rates in the region to our ratepayers for the city of Bothell. And that's something that you, Sabrina, and Recology Cleanscapes and council should be very proud of, that we are delivering, they will be delivering a great product to the city of Bothell at an outstanding price, especially given what it looks like in comparison to our neighboring cities.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Great, thank you. The thing about when you're giving accolades and thank yous and nice jobs, if you don't get it first, you're just repeating what everybody else says. But I do want to echo what's been said up here and to both staff and to Recology Cleanscapes. Thank you for all your hard work and coming together, and I will be supporting this.
Any other comments? Good. Well, thank you, and it looks like you're going to be we're welcoming you to the city, which is a positive thing. Glad we were able to find a $360,000 savings from 2 weeks ago. That's another positive thing for the citizens of Bothell. So, with no further comments, the underlying motion stands, made by Councilmember Lamb, seconded by Councilmember Evans. If everybody could place their vote, and if the clerk can display, passes unanimously. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. Thank you, Realogic. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda this evening is AB 1485, to consider adoption of an ordinance authorizing the construction of City Hall. Our city manager, Bob Stowe, is here to address the council. Bob, are you ready for us?
I am. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening,
Did I
council.
say 1484? Oh, 1484. Thank you for the clarification. City Hall.
So tonight you're considering an ordinance that would allow for the construction of a new city hall that replaces a well-used, a tired, and quite frankly, inadequate public building, which has become increasingly costly to maintain. Your consideration for a new building has been in the making for well over a decade, with meetings within the community, study sessions, as well as city council sessions. In the last year alone, tonight's discussion is the sixth opportunity that this topic has been before you. We last met in study session on May 20th for the purpose of previewing the transaction documents that are needed to move the City Hall forward under a 6320 lease structure. Your packet contains some brief information about the structure of a 6320. We've discussed over the course of many years that the 6320 process is the preferred method of building a facility at the lowest cost and best value for our citizens. Tonight, again, we have representatives here from National Development Council, which is a nonprofit facilitating entity that the city will enter into the lease with. We have representatives from City Investors Development, LLC, also known as Vulcan Real Estate, who is the developer that contracts with NDC to build the facility. We also have Hugh Spitzer, who is serving as the city's bond counsel from Foster Pepper, as well as Susan Musselman, who is the city's financial advisor. All of these individuals are here this evening, again, to address questions that you might have about the documents before you and the ability to deliver the City Hall on time and within budget. On May 20th, we discussed the cost of the City Hall project at the GMP status, the Guaranteed Maximum Price status, before the project was suspended in November of 2011. That project cost was $48,654,374. The projected cost, even with a scope reduction, climbed to $49,821,929 when the project was presented to council in March of this year. The price that was revealed to you on May 20th and also was included in tonight's packet tonight is a reduced project cost, which results in a cost of $46,764,365. That's a significant accomplishment given the inflation that has occurred since November of 2011. The most significant change to the scope in this GMP is that it reduces the total square footage of the building by about 6,000 square feet by dropping a portion of the fourth floor and includes building out the remaining portions of the fourth floor. This not only creates better value rather than having an unfinished fourth floor, it right sizes the building today as well as in the future, and also allows us to build that remaining portion of the fourth floor should we need it in the future to accommodate staff. Again, this is likely to be a building that will survive for the next 75 years or more. The additional space gained from fully finishing that reduced size building is that will allow for central storage until such time in the future that we need that storage area for staff and services. Under the reduced building size, the city would not be pursuing leasing any portion of the fourth floor, as we'll occupy all the space for our internal functions. And doing so means we'll avoid issuance of any taxable debt, which likely would have been necessary if we were to pursue any leasing possibilities on the fourth floor, which of course would have raised the cost of the project with higher interest rates. The construction of a new city hall is an important decision for the city. The building is an essential public facility. It's not a discretionary expense. The city is currently in a building that was originally built, as you heard, in 1938, and is falling apart and will not last for another 75 years. A new city hall will combine almost all of the city services and functions that are most visited and needed by the public into one building. The decision to locate and build a city hall in downtown was discussed by this community and by our council as a method to help ignite, infuse the redevelopment that's occurring in the downtown, and unlock the flow of private sector capital into our downtown. Just as important as the other investments that we have made, those being purchase of the property to perform the environmental cleanup, the completion of the Crossroads project, as well as the initiation of Phase 1 of the Boulevard. All of this was necessary for our reimagined and reinvented community. Citing the City Hall at the heart of downtown also includes almost 200 employees at build-out, which will serve as a significant office tenant that will positively impact the health of our businesses during the day, while parking will provide needed facilities for both existing as well as new businesses that come into our downtown. There are many reasons that a new facility is needed, and it's been well documented and discussed over the last decade. The team that you'll see in just a moment, I'll invite up to the table, has spent a tremendous amount of time and energy in creating an energy efficient office building along with the public and the civic components that fit the character as well as the function for Bothell. And our public and businesses, I think, will be proud of this facility for decades. As I mentioned, the team is here tonight, and we stand ready to address any questions that council might have, remaining questions that council might have about the City Hall project. And so I'll complete my remarks tonight by simply recommending that the council adopt the proposed ordinance moving forward with the City Hall project.
Great. Thank you so much, City Manager. I appreciate it. I think what we'll do first is jump into public comments or questions. So I do have a sign-up sheet, but I actually only have one for this one, and Sandy already addressed us on this issue. Is there anybody else? Mr. I believe it was Habelwitz, is that correct? And if you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and it's on Agenda Bill Item 1484.
Thank you. That's Habelwitz, thank you.
Yeah.
There is no question we need a new city hall. I've visited that plenty of times to see. No one's disputing that. The real discussion here is about how much we're spending on it and what kind of input we've had from the public in that decision-making process. Probably the most important factor here is that we're making assumptions in how much REIT money will be available going forward. And I've seen some very aggressive projections that would cover a new city hall. I've also seen what the history shows, and that is that if we continue at historic levels, we're not going to have enough money to cover this and not have to raise taxes. The fact that it really hasn't come to any attention of the public to give input on this, I think is really, it's not serving what we need. The fact that you're pulling out money from REIT doesn't mean that it's not going to cause an increase in taxes. Similar to when I take my daughter out and we go shopping and she'll say, hey, I want to buy this toy. If she buys this toy, she spends all her money on it, well, then where's she going to spend her money on food? Well, she's not buying the food, but I am. But the point is that if you spend it all on the toys, then you won't have it for the other things that we really need. And though I didn't bring with me, I could certainly show you some photographs of the roads in my neighborhood and where I live, where there are about 1,000 families that live in the area behind the Seattle Times building. That neighborhood has one and only one connection to the rest of the city of Bothell. That road behind Seattle Times has no sidewalk. It has a deep ditch on one side of the road, totally overgrown, and on the other side of the road in the winter is mud, and in the summer is totally overgrown with blackberry bushes. The road itself has, from all of the heave frost underneath it, because the road has not been maintained at all, now has gotten to the point where you're going to have to remove the asphalt and repave the whole thing because of the heave frost that has totally cracked up the road to the point where it's more like a gravel road. So those are the kinds of things that I would like us to be spending our money on, because we're going to run out of it if we spend it all on a city hall. We'll have a pretty city hall, but unless I can come out and hang out over here, it's not going to do me any good. And understand that I live half a mile from the YMCA, and I have to drive my daughter to the YMCA. We can't walk there because it is totally unsafe. I have seen people pushing baby strollers in that road because there's no place else to be. And there's a blind turn on either end of it, so it really makes it a treacherous place to be if you're a pedestrian or even a bike. So with that in mind, I would like us to see a more moderate expense on the City Hall and perhaps some more input from the people to know what we really want and not assume that this is what we want.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak on the City Hall that has not already? No? Okay, seeing none. We'll go to council questions. Who would like to start us off? Mr. Evans?
Before I start council questions, I would, if possible, I'd like our city manager. I mean, it's apparent some of the people who testified tonight don't necessarily have a background in this process and that type of thing. And I don't know if in general, city manager, for example, funding, REIT has come up. Could you just generally explain what the funding sources are for this project? I think that was one of the big questions. Education, which the city of Bothell doesn't fund education, so that's not for us to do. But there was, I think, revenue projections. Maybe this will come up later. Ms. Gwynn mentioned that. But if there's any just general comments that you can give the public to answer some of these general questions, that would be appreciated. I would appreciate that.
Sure. Enjoy that opportunity and certainly appreciate the citizens' comments and the inquiries. You know, City Hall, I've been the city manager here for nearly 10 years, and there has been no topic, bar none, that has received more discussion in these chambers than City Hall. That dates back till 2005. It predates my arrival, but I recall the discussion starting in 2006, the very first capital facilities plan, leading up to tonight's discussion. I went back quickly today and just kind of charted out the number of opportunities that this has landed in front of council and had a public discussion. 27 opportunities, 27 meetings. That's more than any topic, more than the downtown visioning process. And so, although there has been a robust discussion, certainly it's been over a period of time, and we have analyzed, evaluated, looked at when is the best time to build a building. You recall back in November we suspended that. Wasn't the best time. Economy hadn't recovered enough. We needed to march further along in some of our capital investments. We have now satisfied a lot of that criteria. That's why we're back again before you. Councilmember Evans, you asked about the REIT analysis and the analysis that was performed by the city to determine, can we support this payment? Can we support it without additional taxation? And the answer, after a thorough analysis which occurred in discussion in this chambers on November, I've written the dates down earlier, November 12th, 19th, and 26th. Those are the 3 dates in which we had, again, a robust discussion about the city's ability to pay for City Hall. REIT was one of the revenue sources. From a conservative perspective, we only identified REIT. But there are other revenue sources that we believe that were available to us should REIT not be able to, not come in as projected. Those included almost $10 million of land sale, surplus land sale, that are in progress today on downtown properties. It includes other expenses and revenues that we have available to us in addition to REIT. And so we feel back in November, we were very confident in our ability to be able to support the lease payments associated with the 6320 lease. That hasn't changed today. In fact, if anything, it's improved given our improved economy as we proceed into 2014. I'm sure our finance director could provide more information in regards to our available revenue sources, but that was the type of discussion that was held in November, at least on those 3 dates of 12, 19, and 26. The latest discussion, anyway.
Thank you. And I don't know, is there any revenue projections? I think Councilmember Gwynn had requested that. Do we have any? That information isn't necessarily in our packet, but it's been before us many times.
Because we didn't include it in this packet before we went forward with the pre-development agreement, remember what led us to those discussions, that we needed to re-engage the development team to update the design plans from 2011 to today's standards. And so before doing so, we wanted to assure ourselves, before spending any more design money, are we going to be able to fully support this project at the end of that design exercise? And so it was those November meetings where all that information was prepared and distributed. And it wasn't included in part of your packet based on the belief that that decision had been discussed, vetted, and then made in November of 2013. But it's all available. I believe it's still probably all available online. If not, we could provide copies of that information to anybody who's interested.
Conclude your comments?
No, I just wanted that general response back to the public. A lot of times they ask questions and we are not able to answer them directly. So I just wanted the general public to hear some of those comments. I have comments of my own or questions of my own here, but when it's my turn, I'll be happy to ask those.
And Mayor, if willing, I'd like to invite the team up to the table so that they can ask questions. You can ask questions of them as well. So
good to see you.
You, Spitzer, the Bond Council, City Development Investment, and then National Development Council.
Great. Good to see you, gentlemen. You wouldn't mind just folding Joe Beck's name tag down? He's a great guy with a great name, but people on TV may think you're him. So, perfect.
And Mayor, I'm going to join these gentlemen at the table, too.
All right, good deal. So, council, questions? It is 7:10. We started at 9:54. So let's keep our time in consideration as we ask our questions, and then we'll go into deliberation after we at least have one round. Unless we don't even have a round, and we'll go straight into a motion. Is there a motion? Councilmember Evans?
Well, I'll be happy to answer questions or ask questions, but I know there's a lot of council members do. So if the other end of the table wants to start this time, that'd be fine. And I don't have a lot of questions. I have some, but as stated, I started on this council in 2008, and I can remember the discussions of this project clear back then, and has continued on up to this time period. So there's been a lot of review on this particular topic. Just quickly looking on page 345 of the project budget. On line 68, it talks about $1.5 million. That is the contingency that's in this project. And it's my understanding that the agreement that we have states that that's project contingency that's in there for the development of the project and that type of thing. Because we have a guaranteed maximum price, hopefully we're not going to have to use any of that contingency, but it's there if we need it for the developer. But there is an incentive in the contract, is my understanding, that the developer, any of that is saved, the developer gets 1/3 of that, and the city gets 2/3 of that. Is that correct, City Manager?
That's correct. If the developer is able to achieve the project for the fixed price component of the project, that $43,395,372, that 1.5 is then distributed 1/3 to the developer, 2/3 retained by the city.
So hopefully that's an incentive for the developer too. He can save some money on his end if he's able to keep this the project online with the budget. The other question I had was on actually it says line 69 in here, which really should be line 79. I think if you look down under allowance items, it goes along 76, 77, 78, 69. That should really be 79, I think, is the intent. And that line refers to, I should say, all of those allowance items, that funding, right above that line is the total fixed price, and all of that information below that, at least in the allowance items, is funding that the city controls. Is that correct?
That's correct. All of that $2.8 million amount is controlled by the city. The specifically line 69, which you point should be line 79 in actuality, is the city's or the tenant's contingency. That is for any scope additions to the project that we haven't determined might be necessary at this point in time, but might determine council is interested in those during the construction period.
So if something comes up in the project that wasn't thought of before or was missed or whatever, that we as a city want to add to the project, that's our change order fund, so to say, to add things to the project.
That's correct. You could spend all of it or spend none of it.
And I think as a council, it would be helpful for us to know, to kind of monitor that account and see what happens throughout the process. I'm sure there'll be updates, construction updates to us and things, but I would be interested to know, I mean, as long as we've been ongoing in this process, I would think staff has had a tremendous amount of input into this facility, and hopefully we've got everything in here that's going to be necessary to make this facility successful. But if things do come up, it would be interesting to have that come back to the council just for awareness and to approve those additional costs, even though we're allowing for that now. And I'm not talking about the $100 or $200 items. I'm talking about the $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever the limit might be. But I think that would be of interest to the council to have that come back and as those changes. And hopefully there won't be any, because if there isn't any, we save that $800,000. But it's an insurance policy in there, I guess, if something is missed, is my understanding.
That's correct.
The maintenance of the facility, page 201 talks about maintenance of the facility by the tenant, and it's my understanding that we have not made that decision yet, whether the landlord or the tenant, being the city, will be the one who maintains that building. We have an option, I guess, to go either way on that. When will that decision come back to us as far as what's going to be the best way to operate that building and maintain it, I should say?
I would imagine we'll start identifying what the appropriate scope should be, because we do anticipate it's not going to be entirely maintained by city staff. That's not the existing practice today. This is a highly energy efficient building. We'll have to have some professional engineering contract to maintain certain functions of the building, so it'll likely be a hybrid approach in which we'll maintain some portion of the building and likely hire out other portions of the building. And so we'll start developing that scope of work with the landlord, the National Development Council, probably maybe 3-6 months into the construction, so that we assure ourselves enough time that we can evaluate any competitive bids, have that discussion with council, implement the contracts, and then by the time that the building is ready to opening, have somebody on board ready to go.
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion throughout this process about the funding or the tax-exempt bonds that we're issuing, and question, are we bordering on that edge of that they should be tax bonds instead of tax exempt? Does the work qualify for that? So I guess I just want to be assured again that we are in good standing as far as issuing tax exempt bonds, that there isn't a point that the IRS is going to come back to us and say, you used the wrong funding source here or something. Can you or the finance people or someone comment?
I'll give you the general response, and I'll allow our bond counsel to respond. But I think we're confident, our team is confident, that we have satisfied the requirements of the 6320 process. They do allow for a certain amount of the use to be non-public use, and we fit that well within that category. And so we're not concerned that we'll be in violation of any IRS ruling. But again, I'll let our bond counsel speak more specifically to that.
We expect the bonds will be tax exempt. The city manager was very adamant that there be a significant cushion, so that if there's some private use here or there, somebody has a coffee stand or a little shop of this kind or that kind, that there, and if there's parking that is allocated to private users, that there still is going to be a significant cushion. So it's
pretty unlikely that there would be a problem. He's been very conservative, and of course, we're very conservative about that.
And I understand Foster Pepper will pick up any of that if there is a problem with that.
If there's a problem on the tax council end and the analysis end, and we don't call it right, then we do have a responsibility. There's no question about that.
Great. Thank you. I didn't know that, but I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, yeah.
There was a question on the cost. We've worked well to get that cost down. I think the staff has worked very hard on that. But the bottom line is this is a $53 million project with the other costs, the financing costs and things associated with that. And I know that was a question that's been raised and a concern that I have of why that number is. I think the letter in our packet from Susan Musselman was a good explanation of that. And I don't know if this is a reasonable analogy, but if I buy a house or want to build a house, I go out and get a construction loan. There's interest on that construction loan. And then when I finish the construction, I then take out a mortgage on my home for the next 30 years, whatever the case may be. I don't know if this is kind of what this financing costs relate to that you would have in any construction project, these type of financing costs that they're added on once the construction is, the building is built. Is that a correct assumption on my part?
I'd invite the author of the letter who would directly respond to your question, Councilman Evans. Sure.
Good evening. I'm not sure if you're speaking to all of the costs or just the capitalized interest portion.
Issuance of bonds, capitalized interest, those types of things
Okay.
that you included in your letter.
So the capitalized interest functions much like you described. So it's really your construction period interest.
Okay.
Because there's not an amortization of principal during that time. The cost of issuance, I pointed out in the memorandum, there's the issuer fee is unique to a 6320, but we've talked about that in the past, that there are some unique expenses, and that's about $500,000. And there are costs of issuance that include legal fees, prospectus, a disclosure, financial advisor, that are customary expenses, although with the 6320 by definition, you've seen the stacks of legal documents, so they're a little higher than a traditional bond. But yes, I would say the costs are generally customary, and particularly for 6320.
So for a 6320 project, are these financing costs in our project higher than normal, or is this what you see in this type of a funding approach?
I would say they're typical.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. And I don't know, the council received a letter on the dais tonight from Public-Private Development Solutions, which talks about really more the pros of financing the 6320 method, and I thought it was a very, very good letter. I don't know who that came from sure, but Bill Engel. So, but I appreciate that. That was a good explanation of that.
And just further commentary on that note, that Bill Engel of Public Development Solutions, they were the firm that the city hired to solicit the competitive, or to manage the competitive process from which City Development Investors, or Vulcan Real Estate, was selected as the developer. And this is information that's important and is referred to in the recital D in the ordinance, just simply indicating that utilizing private sector methods, private sector financing would be far more expensive than the tax-exempt financing that's utilized through the 6320 process.
Okay, great. That was good information. Am I running close? I'm just about done.
I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. You are over, but I'll give you my 3 minutes toward the 3 minutes you're over.
Thank you.
How much more time do you need?
I'm going to do this real quick. We received a bond, regarding the bonds, we received earlier, I think it was back in, this report is dated October 15th, 2013. It's the D.A. Davidson report where they did a credit assessment of the city and looked at how these bonds affect us and what they might do to our bond rating and that type of thing. I guess my question, I don't know if this would be who this would go to, but in that report, it projected our ratings to be I guess it's a AA3, and I was just wondering if that is still what we are projecting as the bond rating, or what we expect we will be rated on these bonds. If someone can, I don't know who could answer that.
Sure. The D.A. Davison report was the topic of discussion during the 3 November meetings that we held in 2013. And the conclusion was that issuing 6320 lease debt is not going to materially have an impact upon the city's credit rating. That was the outcome of that report. That is a Moody's rating. And we would, and we're actually receiving a rating through Standard & Poor's, S&P. So the rating distinctions are different, but we expect they'll produce a similar sort of interest rate, but they do rate issuance of bonds differently.
And there's a possibility that rating could even be improved.
There's that possibility. Our financial advisor might be able to tell you what the equivalent S&P rating is to the Moody's AA2.
Yes, again, as was stated, the city currently has a Moody's rating of AA3, and the equivalent rating from Standard & Poor's would be a AA minus. They do rate on different factors. One of the factors that may strengthen your rating with Standard & Poor's is economic circumstances. And just a reminder, as we talked about in the May meeting, these bonds, by the nature of a 6320, would then be expected to be rated just a notch below that, which would be, again, if it's a AA minus for the city, then that would be an A plus for the 6320 bonds. If you were able to get an upgraded rating to a AA, then it would be the AA minus.
Okay. So in common everyday terms, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing.
Okay.
AA is the most common rating, and it's in line with what we see others having, and we're starting to get to a point in this region where we're seeing some cities get a little pickup in their Standard & Poor's rating because of their updated criteria giving more weight to the economy and the improving economy.
And very last question, I promise. Quick one. In this report, it also...
60 seconds. Out of respect for all the other council members,
I'm sorry.
you have amazing questions, for sure.
Okay.
No doubt. How about one more minute?
In this report, in addition to economic conditions, it mentioned that your general fund reserve is a critical element in establishing your bond rating. And budget was discussed here tonight a little bit, and we talked about it. And I guess that's really an important element that we continue to be aware of, is what our general fund reserve is and how that does affect our bond rating. I don't know if very quickly the finance director can tell us how our reserves, what was the lowest point our reserves are at, and now how they've, and now where they're at this point.
Well, I spent some time with S&P today, actually, explaining this. So the council, we've done exactly what we said we were going to do in our 2013-14 budget. And if you read the quarterly report that was mentioned earlier, somebody was reading from, basically we projected, strategized to increase our general fund reserve by $600,000 during 2013, and to do the same in 2014. We achieved that goal and actually came in $50,000 over that. So we are on track for 2014. We look like we're on track. Our actual general fund reserve right now is roughly a little over 10%. 15% is where we like to be. And we basically anticipated in that strategy by the next biennium, which is 15-16, that we would get ourselves back up to 15%. We should be up to 15% by the end of this year. So we're actually ahead of the game. So I feel real good about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I took the balance of the time left and allocated 9 minutes for council members. So Councilmember Evans, you took your 9 minutes and 8 of mine. So I have 1 left. Anybody else have questions, comments? Which I'm happy to give. Councilmember Sandberg.
Are you happy to give any minutes to me?
I only have one left, so maybe we can look at some of the other council members.
Okay.
I typically like to be generous. I gave 3 to you last time.
I thought maybe Ms. Musselman could stay at the podium because I'll follow on some questions. So I'm trying to understand this bond rating because it sounded like apples and oranges to me. We were talking before Moody's rating, and now we're talking Standard & Poor's. So are you telling me that our Standard & Poor's rating now, what you're predicting when we go out to the bond market or when our nonprofit goes out to the bond market on our behalf, are you saying that we have a Standard & Poor rating that's equivalent to a AA minus Moody rating? Is that what you said?
Actually, so Moody's, the way they rate, they use a numeric, so it's a numeric scale, so it's a AA3 from Moody's that you currently have.
Mm-hmm.
But with this particular bond issue, they've applied to Standard & Poor's, so we would expect the equivalent rating to be a AA minus.
And how do you get from a AA3 to a AA minus? How many
Those would
steps?
be viewed as equivalent ratings.
So a AA3 Moody rating is equivalent to a Standard & Poor's AA minus.
Yes. And Standard & Poor's uses this differentiation of, within their AA category, they'll add a plus for the strongest third, a minus for the weaker third, and nothing if you're in the middle. Moody's, on the other hand, adds to their AA a 1 for the strongest third, a 2 for the middle third, and a 3 for the lower third. So that's how we equate the scales.
Okay, so we're AA lower third in both Moody's and Standard & Poor's.
Yes, unless we're successful in potentially boosting through S&P.
And then I really didn't understand so much the lingo in your memo about how we go from a project cost of $46.76 million to needing to borrow $53 million to cover that. And so are you telling me that that we have to pay $4.8 million in interest while construction is ongoing? And is that something that we would do if we were pursuing a traditional municipal bond, or is that just because we're going through the 6320 approach? How does this differ from traditional bond financing that a city would go through versus
And the answer is
6320?
yes. It's $4.8 million approximately of interest during construction that is paid by COB properties while they're constructing the project because they don't have the rent coming in until it's completed. But that amount is added then to the loan repayment and therefore your lease payments over the term. It is customary and necessary for a 6320. It's more optional for your own financing. The reason, people use capitalized interest for a number of reasons, and an example might be a situation where you're paying rent on a facility currently, you're building a replacement facility, and you don't want to make bond payments at the same time you're making rent payments, so you'd capitalize interest. There are other circumstances where clients use capitalized interest.
It just seems like when I looked at that number, it seemed like, wow, the capitalized interest just during the construction phase was 10% of the overall project cost, and that seemed high to me.
Yes, and I will note that the capitalized interest includes an additional 6 months beyond the expected completion date for the project. So assuming things go well and the project's completed on schedule, then there will be some component of that that's available to be presumably applied toward your first periods of rent, or however it's determined to be applied.
And then it says the average interest rate on the bonds in the current market is estimated at 4.5%. And that also seemed high. Like if I was just an individual going out to look for a mortgage, I would be paying that much or maybe even a little less. I would think a government would be able to borrow money at a much lower rate. So how does that interest rate compare to standard borrowing for?
Well, I guess I'd say a couple of things about that. The estimate is, because it's our nature, it's intended to be on the high side. It's intended to be a good faith estimate of current market, but recognizing it's a little bit on the high side because the market goes up and down. So if you were to go forward with this financing today, it maybe would be 4.4, 4.35. It could be a different number. And it's probably about, depending where the rating comes in, it's probably, I'm going to use the lingo and then I'll interpret it for those who would like, but about 15 to 20 basis points higher interest rate than the city might get on their own financing. And that is 0.15% or 0.20 or a fifth of a percent. And again, I mean, that is the market. And there are a lot of comparisons out there generally. Depending if the market's stronger, we may have some ability to achieve lower interest rates.
Because I remember when we got the bond anticipation note, and it was a short-term debt, and we were really excited because it was like 1%, which was a really great way to borrow money. And so when I saw 4.5%, I thought, wow, this doesn't sound as good as what we've done historically. Even though it's different.
Yeah, the reason short-term money was the feds came out and said, what interest rates or the Fed rate was going to be for a certain amount of time. It was pretty secure back then. But now they're having to amortize over 30 years or 31 and a half years. There's a lot more risk involved in 31 and a half years compared to a year and a half or 2 years for the bank. So obviously they're going to charge for that risk. And the difference between us going out and getting a $300,000 house as an individual and going out, if we went out and asked for a $50 million house, I will guarantee you it will be more than 4.5%. So anyway, those are basically the answers to those questions. And what we're seeing is, as far as interest rates right now, is exactly what we've been saying since the City Hall went into the first CFP, was the 4 to 4.5%. So we're really lucky that has stayed, within that range, and that it hasn't increased over the time it's taken to actually go forward with this project. So it'll be between 4 and 4.5%. Either way, the city will be doing well, considering the cost of the facility is going to increase 5 to 6% annually if we don't move forward. And if we don't move forward, also Dawson will continue to be maintained and development will not happen down there. Revenue generating development cannot happen. So this is only one step of the revitalization of our downtown, and the City Hall is a big part of that. And it's also the draw of all these businesses that are coming in.
And then since Councilmember Evans asked about it, he asked, how do you think we're going to pay for operating costs? Is that something that we're going to take on? Is that something that we're going to pay the developer to do? Do you have an idea of how much our monthly operating costs for City Hall are going to be? Do you have any projections on that?
Actually, given the fact that right now that we are maintaining multiple buildings and they're old, very old buildings, and we've estimated about $250,000 a year, but whatever happens with maintenance with this building, it will go out to bid, and whether we go with, the company here or we go with somebody else, it'll go through the same process as anybody else that we would hire on to provide that service.
So you said our total operating costs for our public buildings right now is about $250,000 a year?
No, they're much higher than that. I would not anticipate that we were going to see an increase. Just to be conservative, we have multiple buildings and they're very old and require a lot of investment. City Hall alone in the last year has cost us, I believe, $450,000 in extra maintenance and replacing things. So you add Dawson, and then you add the rent from multiple other locations that we have staff in. You add the portables that we have. and then you think about the heating of these old buildings, you know, with the windows back from 1938 or whatever it was, there's a lot of reason to believe that the cost of maintaining one building that is a new building that has new technology in it will probably be equal to or less than what we're paying now. And again, to be conservative, we will add those dollars in, but don't really anticipate using them.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion? Everybody's liking the delay to the very end.
People get
All right.
People get
Jump on
attacked for
board.
what they say up here, so that's why we delay. But okay. So this is a question for the city manager. So if leased the fourth floor, we would need to use non-tax exempt bonds to build it. That was new information that I haven't heard before. So
We presented that, presented that during the May 20th meeting.
Okay. So then it goes, because I recall that the parking, there was concern about the parking area, and that we do intend that to be used by other uses. And so are we planning on or anticipating to pay non-tax exempt, that's a double negative, non-tax exempt bonds for that cost in the project?
No, we're factoring in that there's approximately 100 spaces that will likely be allocated for private sector use, and we factored that into the 6320 IRS regulations that allow us to do so, and it's still utilizing a conservative number. We will not have to issue any taxable debt associated with that parking.
Okay. So we talked about this last night, but I just wanted to ask on the dais, is that, so we reduced the parking stalls to 265 stalls, and is that adequate for the other commercial pads that are envisioned for this block?
We believe so. I think we reduced it to, it was 265, we reduced it down to 255, we reduced it by 10. It was the 10 sort of deepest stalls in the third level of the parking garage.
But we feel that that's still adequate for, well, actually for the day use of the pads that are on the same block.
We believe so, given the fact that we're not at full build-out with our city staff, and therefore not necessarily needing all the parking for that to be allocated for the city hall. And this is a building for 75 years. There will likely be other transportation sort of requirements and systems in place that may even reduce further the requirement for parking. So we didn't think 10, another way of saying, we didn't think 10 would be a significant impact, either the city hall use or to any private sector use.
So the 6-month interest rates that is basically cushioned for the potential delays in the project, is that I'm trying to reword basically what I think I just heard. Is that the case?
I'll let John Fink, your National Development Council, respond.
You described it very well. The development agreement has 90 days of potential delay if there are what the industry calls force majeure items, acts of God, that are no one's fault and cause a delay. So we need to borrow enough money for a worst case in case that happens. And the rating agencies want to see a cushion beyond that. So there's 6 months worth of additional capitalized interest to cover that first 3 months if it should happen, and then 3 more months if it should happen. We've done 30 of these projects. I've never had any of that money needed to be used, and it is not subject to the incentive for the developer to save money. The developer is required to build it to a schedule, so all of those savings will come back through the not-for-profit to you if they're not used.
Okay.
And it's a standard in the industry. If you don't have the 6 months, you will jeopardize the credit rating on the lease from the rating agencies.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is there ramifications for delaying this project for 6 months?
It will use up the 6 months of additional capitalized interest.
I mean, if we didn't execute tonight.
But no.
If we stayed this.
Oh, do you want me to do that? Or?
Go ahead.
And if you do not approve this and it is delayed 6 months or whatever. Inflation will continue, costs will go up.
And that's the only ramification?
Well, bond interest rates could likely go up. I probably could think of a bunch more if I had more time, but the major ones would be contracts would, Hamilton has negotiated and secured contracts with his general contractor and subs. All of those would expire. The costs of the project would increase. 6 months from now, I would suspect interest rates would not be lower. In fact, they would likely be higher. So a 6-month delay would more than likely increase the cost of your project.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Great, thank you, Councilmember. Further questions? Once we go into a motion, there are no further direct questions to staff, so this is your chance if you haven't already spoken. Is there a motion?
Move the recommended action.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember Agnew. Would you like to discuss your motion?
Sure.
I'll speak
to my motion. So I appreciate the comments that we received this evening. We've spent a lot of money in this city on transportation. We spent $60 million on our Crossroads project, and that was a project that we did in collaboration with the citizens going back to 2001. Mayor Freed, who was not on the council at that time, served on it. And it was interesting when we've talked about the history of this project, it was 8 years ago to the month that the council had its first of the 27 meetings that the city manager has cited on the City Hall project. So this has been a project that has been extremely well discussed over a long period of time, and it's good because it's a big decision. We've made other big decisions in our city without nearly as much public comment. We're spending $16 million on daylighting Horse Creek. We didn't have an extensive public process on that. We didn't go out to the community and hold a charrette and say, is this how you'd like to spend your tax dollars? But that's a project that we spent money on. We also did a new public works center. When I was first elected to the council, our public works center was in a rented building that didn't even have restrooms. It was a shed, literally, and that's where people worked. And we built a new public works operations center. Again, that was about $14 to $16 million project. We didn't go out to the public. We didn't have 8 years of meetings. We said this is a decision that is important. It's something that needs to be built. We talked tonight, or we heard comments about priorities, and the reality is, in government, we have to make those priorities every single day. This is not a choice between having roads, having a police department, having a fire department, or having a city hall. I think it's important when we face a big decision like this to really reduce it down to the most fundamental questions. And we had a question tonight. The first one is, do we need a new city hall? We had a speaker tonight, actually a family member of a council member, who said, is a fierce critic of the project, but said, we do in fact need a city hall. There's not a disagreement about the fact that we need a city hall in our city. Our city hall is 80 years old. It was built in 1938 when our city was 800 people. As our finance director indicated, that project, the costs that we have to maintain existing structures that aren't working well is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're also leasing space, and we have people in temporary buildings. That's an important question, and interestingly, that's not the question that appears to be up for debate tonight. There's a community consensus arrived at over the last 8 years from even the harshest critics that we need a new city hall. Then the question, a foundational, fundamental question, if I were an average voter, I would ask is, where should it be? Interestingly, we had a debate about that too. We had a long public discussion, a vote of council, including the council members who are on this dais tonight, many of them, who voted to put it exactly where our city hall is right now. The people said, I don't want to buy new land to build a city hall. I don't think it's a good use of resources. City hall worked in 1938 on the current location. Make it work on the current location again. A broad community consensus on that. So then you come to, I think, the more challenging question of when should you build it? We had various votes over the last 8 years that the members of council who were present voted for a capital facilities plan to include a new city hall. And the one thing that is constant in that is that our financial position is better today than it was when those votes were cast. The cost, unsurprisingly, has gone up, but it's been fairly commensurate with construction inflation. What we heard tonight is, what is the cost of an additional, after 8 years, additional delay? The answer is pretty simple, and we heard it pretty loud and clear. The cost is that the cost of the project will go up, and interest rates will likely rise, which will again inflate the cost. So if we have a broad community consensus that we need a city hall, we have had a consensus for years about where the city hall should be, and the price of delay, when we first started doing it, the price has gone up. If we delay it, the price will likely continue. It seems that now would be an opportune moment with interest rates at historical lows to build it. The final then question is, what should the city hall look like, or what should the components be? And we've had actually a good dialogue on that. We had a dialogue with the community. We heard robust commentary from members of the public and members of our council who said, I don't know that we need all the space that's planned into the city hall. And that's kind of the rub of building a building. Our current one is almost 80 years old, is you have to look out into the future, not just for the, as was pointed out correctly by a speaker, growth by annexation, but also organic growth. If you drive around Bothell, there's a lot of people who are in the current boundaries of Bothell moving in. We need to build a building that works for both today and also for the future. It's no secret, and we saw from the reactions in the audience, that it's never a politically popular decision to say we're going to build a new city hall. No one is going to get accolades for doing that. No one is going to get applauded for doing that. It isn't a popular decision. The reality is, even the harshest critics of this project would indicate it is a necessary decision. The scope of the project, both in parking and the size of the building, has been reduced. The cost of the building has been reduced from 2011. The question I would return to those who are opposed to this is, if not this, is there any project that you would vote yes on? Because I think that's really the fundamental question in front of this council.
Thank you, Councilmember Lamb. Is there anybody else who'd like to?
Can I make an amending motion?
You can take the floor right now. This is your time.
Okay. I would like to make an amending motion to reduce the size of City Hall from 4 floors to 3 floors.
You're seconding for discussion, is that what you said? So we have a motion by Councilmember Sandberg and a second by Councilmember Rayum. Would you like to speak to your motion?
And so if I speak to the amending motion, then that would also be my time to speak to the main motion?
Mm-hmm. So you made an amendment.
Is that correct?
Yeah. So you're going to
Okay.
speak to what you just put forward,
Right.
and then if it fails, you still have the floor.
Okay. Well, I have some visual aids, so I'm going to go up to the podium there and show a couple things, and I will get around to my amending motion.
Well, are you saying you're going to speak to your amending motion right now?
Yes,
Yeah, good.
I will speak to my amending motion, but not immediately.
Well,
And it
that's
will,
not-
and I can wrap it into the discussion of the main motion.
No, you just made it an amendment. If
Okay.
you'd like to remove that from the floor, speak to the underlying, and then make your amending motion, you can certainly do that. But there is a motion on the floor. You need to speak directly to that amending motion. And then how that outcome is, then you would make comment, because you would still have the floor.
Okay, so then I will withdraw my amending motion and take this opportunity to speak to the main motion.
I'll rescind my second.
You're rescinding your second? There you go.
So we have a lot of discussion about history, and for the members of the audience, I want to confirm some of the feelings that you've had. The last opportunity that you as public had to speak about the City Hall, able to speak before City Council, was in November, the November meetings that have been cited frequently tonight. And for anybody who was in those November meetings and testified, there was, again, considerable testimony against moving forward with the City Hall at that time. So your voices are not alone. They're not inappropriate at coming in this time of the discussion. And so I thank people who are taking time out of their evening to come share their thoughts. So, I think it's important to start with remembering when we started this process, this was back in 2011, we had a discussion about high-level parameters that were going to guide the City Hall project. And so some of those high-level parameters are captured on this first page. The project shall not exceed $42 million for a City Hall facility. And in November, a member of the public asked you to address this discrepancy, that why bother to have high-level parameters if you're not going to abide by them? And we've heard that the cost of construction goes up over time. But I don't know if that's necessarily a good enough explanation. Because when we went through the original competitive process, we chose a developer based on that price. And $53 million borrowing costs on $46.76 million is significantly higher than $42 million, even if you account for increasing construction costs over the years since 2011. The second bullet, the design shall accommodate the creation of a vibrant and dynamic block of mixed uses to energize the economic development of downtown. Very worthwhile goal. Third bullet, and this was regarding my amending motion, which I rescinded, and I'll wrap it into the discussion and make my amending motion at a later time. The City Hall shall include office space sufficient to accommodate the city's long-term needs. The project shall include underground parking to accommodate demand generated by all anticipated uses on the block. At that time, it was thought to be about 300 spaces, which you've heard tonight is 256. And then there are some there's another page of goals. I'll put them up here so that you don't think I'm hiding anything. Again, very good goals, including multi-use meeting facilities, which the plan provides for, inviting and active outdoor public spaces, which the design drawings show, and consistent with the downtown vision. So first of all, I want to address this idea of the cost. Because for me, and I've been an active participant in this process, and I think it's no secret to anybody that I've been opposed to this process since the beginning. So there's my bias right out in front. So back in November, we were talking about a guaranteed maximum price, and this is just from the November 2013 packet. And that's where the council approved an additional $836,000 for design costs. And at that point in November, we were talking about the city's likely cost associated with the revised guaranteed maximum price is projected to be $45.5 million. This amount also includes $2.45 million in contingency. I believe now we've saved some money by reducing that contingency to $1.5 million. But as early as November of last year, a few months ago, we were talking about a price of $45.5 million with a pretty good agreement. And I see the city manager shaking his head, but I copied that right out of the agenda packet. And then from today's agenda packet, we're looking at, some new numbers. And look how good we've done. Back in November 2011, which wasn't too far away from our guiding principles, we had total project costs at $48.6 million. Then they went up to $49.1 million, and now they're down to $46.76 million. And for me, I feel like that bounces around a lot. And so I have to ask the question, how can we have guiding principles that set a maximum price at $42 million, project the price to be $45.5 million just a few months ago, and then think we've done a good job when we've arrived at this final price? And so thinking about how we can save money brings me to the argument about reducing the floors on City Hall. Now, when I last looked at the project plans, and they have changed slightly, I sat down and counted office spaces on the first 3 floors. And this was following the November meeting. The architects went back and did some space planning to make the space more efficient. And when I sat down with the plans and counted out office spaces, this is what I got. So 50 offices. It's a combination of cubicles and office spaces with walls. 78 on the second floor, 51 on the third floor, for a total number of offices of 179 offices. And it has been said that at move-in, we are going to have 119 employees. So if we have 179 spaces programmable and programmed on 3 floors, I believe that we have ample space, even with growth through annexation, to accommodate our employees adequately and comfortably and long-term with 3 floors. Because that increase, that percent increase from 119 to 179 is a 50% increase, essentially, in the number of office spaces. I don't believe our population is going to grow 50%, and even if it did, one doesn't assume that the number of city employees grows directly with the population growth. So I will be making that amending motion about reducing the floors to 3 floors in a cost-saving measure. So that speaks to the bullet number 1 about let's get back to closer to that original guiding principle number, and to bullet number 3, which is to build a building with sufficient space. And I think we have sufficient and comfortable and long-term space with that proposal. But I also was looking at some of the other guiding principles. And what really caught me was the idea of parking. And I've been hung up on parking, on this parking garage, for a long time. I always thought we were building too much parking. Why are we building all of this parking for commercial spaces that are on the master plan for the entire block? And then at one point in May, we had talked about building out the 4th floor and then leasing it, because we wouldn't need the space immediately, but we could lease it. And so then I got to thinking, well, could we really park that as well? And so what I did was I took a look at the transportation technical report for the Bothell City Hall Civic Center block, the entire block, not just City Hall, but the 2 commercial pads that are also envisioned for the entire City Hall block. And this was prepared back in June of 2011. And there's a section in there about parking demand. And I'm sorry, this is a really small table. Maybe I can blow it up for you. But what the consultant did was look at 3 alternatives for what could be programmed in that space. And let's see here. Does that zoom? So let me just say that. Let me move it over here. And so they did this fairly complex parking demand. And what I want to draw your attention to is this line, the PM peak period demand. Okay? And so, and only look at the weekday columns, okay, as you go across. And so you want to make sure that if you have an overall vision for this block, that you're providing enough parking. And so I looked at the peak period demand, and if you add up all of these columns, just the weekdays, not the Saturday, which is kind of what I did right here, it tells us for this particular alternative, which included the idea, the concept for our vibrant mixed-use city hall, supermarket, restaurant or retail, office, and residential, that there was a need with that alternative 425 spaces. But then they do, I'm not really sure, I didn't follow the assumptions or the mathematical reasoning, but if you make some assumptions and you assume that there's full sharing of spaces, instead of needing 425, you only need 352 spaces. And I thought, well, we're not building that much. At one point, we were talking about 270 spaces. That says we need 352 for that alternative. And now we're talking about building 256. So then I got a little concerned, you know, not just cost, but, you know, fundamentally, what are we doing here? And so I looked at all the alternatives. And so if you were to look at the three tables that look like this in that parking study, and you look at the three alternatives. So alternative 1, again, was the uses that I mentioned. Alternative 2 was a lower intensity mix of uses. Alternative 3, lower intensity mix of uses even yet.
Councilmember Sandberg?
Yes.
I would like to take a break. It's 8 o'clock, and
oh, good.
we're all hungry, and so we'll just take like an intermission.
Sounds good. I'll have a lovely time talking with people in the audience. That'd be great.
There we go. Be back in 15 minutes. Back, everybody, from our break. Thank you. Councilmember Sandberg, you still have the floor, literally on the floor. If you could wrap up your comments in the next 5 minutes, that would be wonderful.
All right, will do. So I was talking about the three alternatives that were modeled in the parking demand analysis and explaining my concern that if we're building 256 parking spaces in this parking garage, that we're not meeting the needs of those commercial pads. In fact, to meet the needs of those commercial pads, somehow we need to potentially reduce City Hall parking, and in that document are recommendations to do just that. Recommendations to discourage parking by city employees. So it's been discussed previously that of the number that was built, so at one point we were talking about 270 spaces being built, 165 spaces being used for City Hall parking, leaving 105 left over. Well, then really that speaks to the need of, well, discouraging City Hall parking use. And so there are recommendations in that document that include things like encouraging off-site parking, or hiring a parking demand manager, charging employees for parking, all guidelines to reduce the parking footprint of City Hall to accommodate parking for the commercial pads. And so that's a real concern for me, because what we're doing in this project is, and we've talked about this for a long time, is building the parking to activate that space. And if we're not building enough parking, we're not activating the space. And the suggestion was made, I heard, that, well, why don't we provide parking that doesn't have the same daytime demand as City Hall parking? Well, in my mind, that limits a lot of the kind of development that's going to go on that property. And we don't want to be in the position of limiting that development, because what we want is a design that's going to accommodate the creation of a vibrant and dynamic block of mixed uses. And so if we're going to constrain ourselves to just, for example, hotel use, where we can really count on that shared parking, we're not building a facility that is going to accomplish one of our guiding principles. And so So then I got to thinking, well, okay, so
You
we
need to make a motion, and you have 2 minutes left.
Okay. So, not enough parking. We're going to and use the majority of that parking. We're going to have to use the majority of that parking for the commercial pads that are master planned there to attract development. Well, then that speaks to the question of, well, can we use tax-exempt bonds to finance speculative parking for commercial pads on City Hall? This is a question that I shared with Bill Evans, Councilmember Evans, before the meeting, and shared with Bob. Bob tried to address that. Bond Council addressed that. And what you're telling me is that there's cushion. You feel like there's a cushion to provide some non-public use. And my question is, how big is that cushion? We're going to have to use practically all of that parking to activate any commercial use on those pads. So, in conclusion, I have been an opponent of this project. I'm concerned about project costs. I've talked to you about the ability to reduce project costs. I'm concerned structurally about, is the project that we're proposing to build going to build the parking that's really going to activate the rest of the commercial space? And if we're doing that, are we compromising our ability to borrow that money with a tax-exempt status? Thank you.
Are there other council members that have questions or deliberation? The underlying motion still stands. Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Great, thank you. In my deliberation, I might end up trying to hopefully clear up some things. This has been a project that's been talked about initially as concept and all since before I got in the council when I started in '06, and it was part of the discussions on our comprehensive plan in May of '06, and I've started my third term here, so we're into 14. We've been doing this a long time, and 27 meetings that we've had discussing this, and the history of this council is we're very open with public comment. So even being conservative to say that 18 of those meetings we've had public comment at, or even 15, to say that we haven't had ample opportunity for public comment regarding the City Hall, I think is incorrect. There's been comments about the size of the City Hall. We've downscaled the City Hall. Councilmember Sandberg pointed out in one of her overheads on the third bullet, she highlighted part of that bullet on the build out, but she forgot to include the rest of it, which said, and I'm quoting, including all potential annexation areas. So that was something that was left out of her presentation, was that that part there. When when there was talk about the cost of this being $45.5 million at one point, well, the average inflation for 2011, 12, and 13, not getting into 14 at all, inflation averaged 2.45%, I believe. I'm sorry. Yeah, 2.45%. So that brings it up to $47.9 million in today's dollars. Also, we had the projected costs in November of 2011 of $48.654 million. The inflation obviously brought that up quite a bit. So the costs that we have presented before us, I think, is a great job by staff and our development team and our consultants to bring those costs down. We've got a great project there that, like Councilmember Lamb said, everybody sees we need to build a city hall. Nobody wants to pay for a city hall, but if we don't do it, we pay for it in other ways. We pay for it in inefficiencies in government. It takes longer for things to happen. And that is a reflection of costs that are passed on to developers and builders, which pass it along to the consumers. And so the ripple effect is not right away that we see it, but it's in the big picture of everything. Doing this project that has been at least 8 years in the public eye is the right thing to do right now to get not only our staff in good, clean, safe buildings that are efficient and can serve the public efficiently, but in the long run, it's going to be a cost savings move for us. And this is another building for, well, 38, another 50, 70 years or whatever. 38 wasn't when the last one was built. So I'm fully supportive of the motion here. I think that we're doing ourselves and the public a disservice. As hard as it is to spend for something like this, I'm sure we can all equate to expenses we don't want to do with our own homes, but we have to make it right. This is one of those expenses, and I'm fully in support of this. This is the right thing to do for the public, for our people that work for the public, so they can provide the highest level of service for them.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Are there further comments on the underlying motion? Councilmember Evans.
When you say the underlying motion, the main motion to...
There is only one motion. Yeah,
correct.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've thought a lot about this because, as I stated earlier, started on this council in 2008, and this has been a topic that's been discussed 26 or 27 public meetings that I'm aware of. And I can't think of very many times, not public hearings, 26, 27 times, but times that this has been discussed. And when we discuss things, and if the public has comment or has an interest to comment, the majority of times we do accommodate them to comment. I mean, there has been a lot of public input to this, and it's unfortunate some of the people that spoke tonight haven't had an opportunity to participate in some of those, or maybe they had, I don't know, but it's not like we limit public input. We meet here every Tuesday night. There's an opportunity for public to comment at the podium. It's there, and I think we have got a lot of good public comment, some good questions, and we've tried to respond to those. So this decision tonight is not just tonight and not just for next week or whatever the case may be. This is a decision that will affect this city for 75 years. We all have agreed that there's a need for a city hall building, and the decision we make tonight, whether or not to proceed with this motion, which I am supporting that we do proceed with it, yes. Oh. I appreciate the fact that this is an ongoing project that's going to last for a long time, and so with that, I've heard from the public personally in my discussions with the public that, well, I don't have any need for a city hall. I don't go there. It's not important to me. I'd sooner have parks, or I'd sooner have new roads, or whatever the case may be. And the interesting thing about that, and I think the city manager touched on this initially, was this is an essential facility for the city of Bothell. This is the main city operation facility for the city. You may never go to City Hall. You may never need to go to City Hall, but I guarantee you everything that goes on in City Hall affects every resident of this city every day. So whether you don't think it's needed or not, believe me, there's a lot of work going on there that bears directly on what we as Bothell residents do every day and the type of life we have in this community. So it's not something we can do without. I guess we could set up some tents outside or something to try that approach, but 75 years is a long time, and this building will serve these residents for many, many years throughout this time. we did look, as has been mentioned, and I don't need to go through and repeat all this, but you know, the site selection was a huge process that we went through. There were what, 3 or 4 sites that were considered. Staff recommended a site that was not selected or was not supported by the public. Came back to the council, and we made a change in that, and we chose to site it on this site. So there again, that was just part of the many times that that we have had public input on this. I think we are fortunate to have the staff we do in the city to assist us not only in this project but all projects. And from a financial standpoint, I commented earlier, referred to the D.A. Davidson report, and I was going to read something in there that in general, but essentially what it says is that this city's financial reporting is among some of the best in the state, and that is documented by our annual audits that we have of the state. We are required to be audited in detail every year. And every year those audits come back to the council for review, and they are clean, good audits, and we are complimented for our financial process in this city. So I just want to assure the residents that this decision we're making, it's a big decision. $53 million is a lot of money. But it isn't made lightly. There's been a ton of consideration that's gone into this, the financial analysis. I'm comfortable with the financial information that we've got from our staff. And just one comment, Councilmember Sandberg made reference to that she and I talked about this tax-exempt bond issue, and she was concerned, and I was interested in what her concerns were, and we talked. And it's my understanding that, and I think there was reference made to the fact that no one ever responded to that email where you had asked for information on that. But I know, in my case, I talk with the city manager every week, and I don't know what the other council members do. That's my understanding that he contacts all of us and makes an attempt to do that. And I believe he's set up meetings with other council members that haven't, for whatever reason, haven't been able to come about. So the information sometimes that we get back from the city manager may not be what we want to hear. We may not like the answer, but I do feel like we get the information, and then it's up to us to decide is it right or wrong or whatever the case might be. So, in conclusion, I'm supportive of this. I understand the public's concern. I want them to know that we've worked very hard on this project. I think it will be a significant benefit to the city. It is the key operation center of the city. Everything we do in the city goes through City Hall, so to say. So I believe that this is something that is important to our community, and I will be supporting the main motion.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Evans. Councilmember Rayum or Agnew?
I will be in support of this motion. 1938, they built the City Hall, had 800 people, came out to about 4.3 square foot per person. Now we're a little over 1 with this new building. 1 square foot per person. I think that's probably going to be adequate. I think this building is going to last, like everybody's talked about, for about 75 years. Public has had their input quite a bit. It's been to the dais 27 times. I think it's time. If we disregard and try to postpone it, the only thing that will become of it will be at more cost to the citizens. And I think that is something we should try to avoid. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Councilmember Rayum.
Thank you. So I haven't been involved in all the 27 different meetings. Since I've been on council, I believe it's come here. This is the 4th time, maybe only the 3rd time.
What year did you get on?
Oh, that's a good question. 2011.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times since you've been on.
2012.
2012? 7.
Anyhow, so my I have some concerns. So obviously I don't support the motion. The the main reason, well, there's a few, and they all kind of are compounding. The levy decision is coming to the voters this fall. We'll be in full swing of building a new city hall. I think that sends an odd message to the general public that doesn't track everything that we do and know that there's 27 meetings that have occurred. What they're going to see is a city hall being built when they're being asked for $42 million more. So I see that as an issue because those $42 million in those projects are absolutely vital to the revitalization of downtown, to complete the projects we've started. McMinimans does not have its full budget. It has a shortfall in the amount of money it needs to get going on its project. So we don't know the outcome of that yet. I would hope this council will take action on whether or not to let that continue to roll along and not have that block develop in the near future, because it's been delayed, I believe, by at least a year at this point. And the last piece, and the piece that I brought up at the beginning of the meeting, I feel like there's a lot of expenses that are waiting in the wings for this city. There's a lot of programs that we've cut over the years. Since 2008, I believe we've been cutting from our public safety programs, from our roads programs, from our streets, our sidewalk programs, and just the overall beautification of the city. I grew up here. I've been here since 1975, and I can assure you the look and feel of this city is not the same as it was when I was a child. And that's why I ran for office, because it seemed like the city has fallen asleep on its obligations to the citizens, which was further emphasized when I doorbelled every single street in the city and seen what people are living, how they're living with the city services that they're being provided. So why I wanted to know, and why I brought it up at the beginning of the meeting about what is our 6-year projection, I want to know, when are we going to climb out of this hole? Because quite frankly, I'm not happy with the way the city looks, and I've made that extremely clear a lot on this council, and I don't see an end in sight. And especially when we dedicate all of our REIT funds, $53 million worth, to building a city hall, I feel like that's misprioritized. Should have got on my notes here. And I think it's important, too, to point out that I approved, actually, the redesign of the project. That was one of the first actions I believe I took on City Council about this project. And I wanted to know. I wanted to know what, we're going to refresh the plans and see where we're at. And I approved that. And I did so not because I was giving, quote unquote, a green light to move forward with building a city hall. I did that so we knew what we were talking about. But again, we have a whole bunch of stuff that we haven't done and it's not in our budget. I mean, there isn't a budget item for sidewalk replacement. And so it concerns me that, we'll just go look at the budget documents. Well, it's not there. It wasn't there last time. The only budget that I've approved, it wasn't there. So on that note, Kenmore, I don't know if you've been paying attention recently, but 3 people have been killed in Kenmore because of traffic safety issues that were known by the city. They had public testimony, obviously, with three times in 1 year, that spoke to the issue because they'd just built a new city hall. And I just wanted to, this is out of the Kenmore Reporter, or Bothell Reporter, sorry. It says, former council city member John Henderson played a tape at a meeting that took place a few years ago regarding the funding for projects. He said it showed the council members voted prioritizing paying for a new city hall building over making road repairs. So I feel like that's what we're doing tonight, and I feel like we're just going blindly into this and not knowing what it is that's in the wings, when it's going to happen, that we're going to get this city back to what it was a few decades ago. That's it.
Okay, well, I'll share my comments. The amazing thing about America is we do have free speech, and you can say any absolutely completely ridiculous false thing that you want, and you're given the time to do so. That's our process tonight. We heard plenty of it. So I'm excited to move forward, and so I'm going to focus on the future now because there's so many things that are outlying right now that people can listen to the TV, they can say what they want to say and hear what they want to say, or hear what they want to hear. But the facts are true, and I'll just take a few minutes to read through a few of my thoughts here. And on 5906, we had a study session to hold discussion on capital facilities plan recommendation, and of course there were 3 capital facilities meetings that were open to public for the public to come and hear that discussion. A 5/16/06 study session to continue discussion of capital facilities plan recommendation. These all include the City Hall. On 6/6/06, public hearing regarding capital facilities plan. On 6/13/06, study session to continue discussion on the capital facilities plan. On 6/20/06, study session to review revised capital facilities plan. 7/11/06, consider adoption of resolution approving the capital facilities plan. Consider adoption, on 11/21/06, consider adoption of resolution amending the 2007 to 2013 capital facilities plan. On 12/18/07, consider approval of professional services contract with Rice Fergus Miller for City Hall siding analysis. On 1/8/08, consider approval of professional services contract with Rice Fergus Miller for City Hall siding analysis. On 7/29/08, public meeting to receive public comment on City Hall siding study. On 10/21/08, public meeting to receive public comment on city siding study. On 16/09, public meeting to receive public comment and council discussion on City Hall location. On 7/20/10, consider approval of professional services agreement with public-private development solutions for services related to City Hall campus project. On 2/15/11, consider approval of the pre-development agreement for the design of the City Hall City Center. On 3/15/11, council confirmation of high-level parameters to guide the public engagement process for City Hall City Center project. On 4/12/11, study session regarding City Hall public engagement process. 5/10/11, study session regarding City Hall public engagement process. On 6/7/11, consider adoption of resolution setting a public hearing to vacate the undeveloped right-of-way located on the City Hall block. On 6/14/11, council acceptance of the site plan and City Hall design and architecture discussion of public art. 7/12/11, public hearing and adopt ordinance for City Hall block alley vacation. 7/26/11, accept the proposed City Hall design and architecture. On 5/14/13, approval of contract of City Hall early site demolition, Phase 1. On 11/12/13, study session amendment to pre-development agreement. On 11/19/13, study session amendment to pre-development agreement. 11/26/13, approval of amendment to pre-development agreement with city investors. On 3/11/2014, study session regarding status update of City Hall project. On 5/20/2014, study session regarding status update of City Hall project. And of course, today, we've had public outreach. I've certainly had a little article on the front page of the Bothell website. You can go there and see that. We've had information out to the public because this is the public City Hall. And what I don't appreciate is accusations from other council members this evening that this council's hidden things from the public, because that's a direct attack on my character and other fellow council members' character, which is not fair and not right. So what I think would be appropriate is, as we are discussing and we're putting information out to the public, we do it in a way that is transparent, not just to make our own argument with a limited amount of facts, but with a full set of information for the public to digest. I'm excited to move forward this evening with this vote. And so if there is a motion, as I understand, Deputy Mayor Spivey may have a motion.
Yes, I understand we do have a motion on the floor.
Oh, sorry.
But I do have a motion to close debate.
You have a motion to close debate. Okay. I think we're done. We've already gone through. So we can vote on the motion. Anybody want to speak to the motion?
There's no debate.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed, so it passes unanimously. So if everybody can place their vote on the underlying motion, which is to approve the proposed ordinance, which is within our packet, and we all received this amendment to clarification of the language, that would be included as well. So everybody can place their vote. And the clerk can display. Passes 5-2, which is a wonderful thing for the city of Bothell. Thank you. Moving on to the next issue on our agenda, which is AB 1485. our city manager, Bob Stowe, is with us. Bob?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, this is a companion item to the last subject matter. But in order to keep the City Hall on project to enable construction to start in July of 2014, City Investors Development has requested an amendment to the pre-development agreement that will allow them to continue with the design until the bonds are issued on July 21 of this year. You'll note that the agreement does stipulate that City Investors Development will not invoice the city for any work that can be appropriately included in the invoice under the 6320 bond financing. It's our intent that this amount will not be paid by the city. It's simply as a backstop, a safety net, if you will, if for some unlikely reason that the bonds are not issued by July 21st, the city would pay for these pre-development expenses, much in the same way we paid for the previous pre-development expenses. They're design drawings. It's a work product that the city will continue to own. I'd be glad to address any questions that council might have at this time.
Great. Are there any questions? Any deliberation?
Move the recommended action.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lamb, a second by Councilmember Agnew. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, let's place our vote. And the clerk can display. Passes 5-2. Next on the agenda is something maybe a little bit more lively and fun. Pardon? More palatable, absolutely, which would be AB 1486, which is a public hearing to consider potential code amendments regarding food trucks. Actually, before I do, a point of personal privilege, I just look forward to working with the Vulcan crew as we move forward. Thank you, Hamilton, and your team. We are proud to have you as a part of the city of Bothell. It's going to be amazing for me, my kids, and the future to come. Thank you. Thank you all. Sorry I didn't do that earlier. David, thank you so much for coming. I look forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you and good evening. Good evening. Sorry. This item was identified by council as part of the 2011 miscellaneous code amendments. The initiating language pointed out that that the zoning code didn't have any regulations related to food trucks, and that it asked the Planning Commission to consider amendments to do so because of the use of food trucks had become popular recently at that point in 2011. Planning Commission held a study session and public hearing on these amendments over 3 meetings, and most of the discussion at that time did have to do with the food truck issue. The staff, during that process, staff was asked to do additional analysis of the amendments to regulate food trucks, to contact the Chamber of Commerce, to get input from Public Works, Police, and Fire Department staff. There was no public testimony during the Planning Commission's hearings on this, but the Chamber of Commerce did submit a range of comments from its members. In the end, Planning Commission determined that Bothell didn't have sufficient pedestrian traffic to warrant accommodations for food trucks, and out of concerns also for the brick and mortar establishments, competition for those establishments. But they did recommend council review the provisions, the only provisions that existed for food trucks, which was in the Municipal Code Section 532, peddlers, Chapter 532. So the initial council review happened in June 5th of 2012 on the entire package of miscellaneous code amendments. At that time, council directed staff to separate the food truck issue and bring it back together with Chapter 532, peddlers. The city attorney later determined that Chapter 532 was a susceptible challenge in court of law, and that it should be repealed, which was done on April 1st of this year. And for that reason, we are bringing the food truck issue back to council separately. Could you turn the lights down so the screen is better? There we go. Since the Planning Commission's recommendation was based in part on the existence of Chapter 532, staff felt that it was appropriate for council to consider allowing food trucks, and basically what we're presenting are the amendments that Planning Commission had developed before choosing not to make any amendments. So a little background information that's important to note. Food trucks, or mobile food units as they're referred to in state law, are regulated by the State Administrative Code, which provides for pretty extensive health and safety requirements. The State Department of Motor Vehicles and Labor and Industries both regulate the vehicles, and the county health districts actually license the mobile trucks, and their regulations cover the health and operation of the food trucks. Some of the key points: food trucks must have a commissary for food prep, storage, and cleaning, and they must have bathrooms within 200 feet.
Mr. Mayor, I have a point of order.
Yes.
The meeting adjourns at 9 o'clock, and I understand there may be individuals who'd like to comment from the public, as well as we have an executive session this evening, so I would propose that we move an extension of the meeting until 9:30.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Dave.
So, given that the Health Department licensing covers the operation of the food trucks, to avoid redundant or conflicting regulations, any Bothell regulations should focus on where to allow the food trucks, which is what we've tried to do. So, just to give you a bit of these are the opening pages of each county's regulations and packets, application packets for food trucks. Just to give you a sample of what's out there, food trucks these days come in all sizes and shapes and include trailers like the one in the upper right corner. That particular one was very successful, and they've recently opened their first brick and mortar restaurant, and that's a trend that a couple of food truck operators have experienced. Many other jurisdictions are amending or have recently amended regulations to encourage food trucks to provide eating options and urban vitality. So with that, the next steps, we have received 6 new written comments, including requests for 2 revisions, and I'm going to pass those out now. Each packet contains all 6 of the letters that I've received just in the last couple of days. And I'd like to officially enter these into the public record. Exhibit 1 was in your packet from the Planning Commission hearings. Exhibit 2 is a letter from the University of Washington, Bothell. Exhibit 3 contains email comments from Greg Wagner, the owner of The Ultimate Melt, a food truck business. Exhibit 4 is a letter from the Greater Bothell Chamber of Commerce. Exhibit 5 are email comments from Kai Hui Yao of Vertifor, a business out in the North Creek Business Park. Exhibit 6, email comments from Becky Riopel of Cascadia Community College. And Exhibit 7, a letter from Leslie Plastino of Snitzer West. So at this point, I'll entertain any questions, but the process would be to take testimony, deliberate, close the public hearing if you feel you're ready for that, and then direct staff to prepare an ordinance and council findings for a future meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. Actually, I'm going to have, since this is a public meeting, an open public hearing, I do have a sign-up sheet. I'd love to have the public come and address us this evening, and then we can jump into council questions and deliberation. First I have on the list is Chelsea Handren. Is that right? Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Again, my name is Chelsea Handren, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'll keep my comments short and brief because I know we've got some other students here who would like to speak on behalf of the food trucks as well. I am the Housing and Food Services Manager at the University of Washington Bothell, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the University of Washington Bothell to speak in support of this proposed code amendment with the following changes and clarifications. You have in your packet a letter from Kelly Snyder with the University of Washington Bothell's comments on the proposed code. There are two specific points of clarification, I guess, in question that we have at this point in time based on the current proposed code amendment. The first one specifically is the category for which the campus would be evaluated. And the question truly is, would we be considered public or private? The second one is we would encourage you to consider allowing food trucks within 100 feet of existing food establishments or food operators if they would agree to the food truck being within 100 feet. I'd also like to just briefly share with you a couple of additional details to supplement this information. Several years ago, the University of Washington Bothell surveyed our campus community and asked them what they would like to have as amenities. One of the strongest responses was additional food services on campus. And so in order to respond to that need, one of the things that we introduced at the time and currently are providing are food trucks on our campus. As part of this food truck rotation program that we're currently offering, the University of Washington Bothell has a very rigorous process of evaluation and selection of the food truck vendors to protect the health and safety of our community, and that is our number one priority, and mine as the manager of the food service program there. The food truck sales are strong, and at the same time, they have not impacted the existing food service offerings on campus, which is something that I specifically looked to make sure would not have an impact because our food services are an auxiliary service and are self-sustaining. And so we would want to be very sensitive to that to make sure that we weren't taking away from existing sales on campus at other locations. And in general, the campus community loves the variety of food truck offerings, and it has been well received on the campus. And so again, in concluding my comments, I would just say that we would encourage you to continue to allow food trucks in the Bothell, and pass this ordinance. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any at this time.
I have one. Great, you do have one. Councilmember Lamb?
I had a question, and I guess this is to staff, would it be considered a public, just responsive to your question, would it be, University of Washington Bothell be considered a public or private entity under the code?
In terms of applying the code, we'd treat it as we would treat a private development parcel. So in reality, it's true it is a public entity, and there's even been periodically over the years some question whether the city has legal jurisdiction to control what happens on that state property. But in general, we have come to an agreement to cooperate on these things. They are controlled by the planned unit development agreement, and under that it would be regulated as we would for a private parcel.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the speaker? No? Great, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
James Anderson. Mr. Anderson, nice to see you again. Saw you at the opening of the Science Building. Nice to see you.
Yes, sir. It was a pleasure seeing you there as well. Hello and good evening, Mayor Freed, City Council members. My name is James Anderson, and I am a junior studying business management at the University of Washington Bothell. I stand here in front of you today as both a student at large and also as the newly elected president-elect for the Associated Students of the University of Washington Bothell. It is a pleasure to stand in front of you today on behalf of my students at the University of Washington Bothell to address the concern put forth by the city of Bothell. The concern is that having food trucks on campus may potentially take away revenue from local brick-and-mortar establishments within the city. The concern is that having increased food options on our campus will drive away people. Well, as a passionate connoisseur of food and a cook myself, I can tell you that food does quite the opposite. Food has the power to bring people together, and I believe that by offering food trucks on our campus, we will be able to better integrate the City of Bothell and the University of Washington Bothell and Cascadia Community College campuses together. Throughout the past years, and as Chelsea has mentioned, we have been able to establish 3 solid facts about our students at the university. 1, our students want to have variety in their food options available. 2, students want to pay for quality food at a fair price. 3, students want to have the chance to eat out, both on campus and off campus. Well, food trucks provide a way to fulfill these desires for students. The beautiful thing about having food trucks is that during the day, I have access to quality food on campus while I'm transitioning between classes, while I'm studying for finals, and while I'm doing my homework as well. One of the beautiful things is that being so close to downtown Bothell is that I'm just a stone's throw away from many of the restaurants in the downtown area. Personally, I love many of the options that are available, whether it's going to Pen Thai, whether it's going to have a pint of Guinness at the Three Lions Pub after a hard day in class, or even going to the Tandem Wine Bar in case I meet a nice lady, you know. So I have no doubt that both the students and community members will continue to dine out at the wonderful restaurants that the City of Bothell has to offer. By having such amendments as food trucks on campus, it incentivizes our students to spend more time there and therefore more time in the City of Bothell. We have adequate pedestrian traffic as well to justify the need for this food traffic. So as a passionate connoisseur of good food, as a student, and as incoming student body president, I ask you to please pass this ordinance. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for making the City of Bothell a wonderful place to be in.
Mr. Anderson, it's obvious why you've been elected president.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Very impressive. Glad to have you in the city, for sure. David Edwards, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, too. Good evening. My name is David Edwards, and I'm a student at the University of Washington Bothell. I also serve as the current Associate Students at the University of Washington Bothell Vice President. And I believe that passing this food truck ordinance will not only benefit the UW Bothell community, but also the Bothell community as a whole. A year ago, I served as an orientation leader at the University of Washington Bothell, where I mentored over 50 students. While mentoring students, one of my main goals was to get students integrated in this beautiful Bothell community we have here. But one of the troubles I struggled with was keeping students on campus. Students felt like there wasn't enough food options for them to stay on campus, so they always would go home, have lunch, which they went home to areas such as Seattle, Everett, areas outside the Bothell community. If we're able to have a way for students to stay on campus, to be able to have more time to really get involved with the Bothell community, that won't only help the Bothell community, but it'll also help the businesses. By providing this avenue for students to really get involved on campus, they'll have more time to go downtown Bothell, in all the surrounding areas to help facilitate their integration into the Bothell community, which I feel is very important to students and the Bothell community as a whole. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I have Lee Henderson's name on here, but she has gone home. How about Anthony Stillman? Good to see you, Mr. Stillman.
Hi, I'm Anthony Stillman, and I'm a UW Bothell student. The UW Bothell, before the food truck, the food there was very generalized. It focused on the main group which was mostly people without food allergies, and that kind of sucked for people with food allergies like me. I'm allergic to gluten and dairy, so my food options were limited before the food trucks were trail mix, gluten-free brownies, and bananas sometimes, and I kind of sucked because I meant if I stayed at the school for a long time, I just wouldn't have any food, and I just go hungry. And this is, for a lot of people with allergies at the UW Bothell, this is what happened to them before the food trucks came. But with the food trucks, when the food trucks arrived, they provided a lot more variety in our food, and this variety came up with options that were not bad for the people that were available for the people with allergies. So it would be very nice if you could keep the food trucks on campus so we can keep on eating and not be hungry for half the day. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Excellent. Anybody else from the public like to address this matter on the food trucks in the city? All right.
Move to close the public hearing.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Doing all right over there? So that's 6-1. Passes. So there's no questions for council, I guess, or for staff. So is. But how do we close public hearing and then still have questions for staff?
Question.
We can do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So who's first? Evans?
So, Dave, is there a difference between a food truck and a food cart? I mean, literally, I understand they're different in size and how they operate, but how we control them, is there any difference in that, any different requirements, or would there be?
Yeah, and we can, if you're prepared to do it at this point, we could go page by page through the proposed code. But essentially, the differences are that we've added a buffer for food trucks. We've kept the same limit of 1 per block, but we've added a buffer 100 feet from an existing eating establishment. University of Washington Bothell and at least one of the other comment letters that you've received this evening have suggested that we provide an exception for if an eating establishment wants to have a food truck closer than 100 feet, that they could do that by submitting a written request, and staff would support that suggestion. And in fact, I've gone ahead and incorporated some of the suggested revisions into the draft code language that we can review if you feel like doing that this evening.
So, about the location of a food truck, it talked about adequate lane width and sidewalk width. Will those be established, or will those be specified in the code what those are, or who determines what's adequate?
That'll be part of the Public Works Department review of the application.
So there will be an exact number or size of what that width should be?
Well, whether there's an exact number or whether they'll do it on a case-by-case basis, reviewing the proposal, and
okay.
We haven't really established any design standards for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are nonprofit festivals are talked about being discussed a little differently here or something, I guess?
Yeah, there are two instances where food trucks can operate, well, at least two instances where food trucks can operate legally. Nonprofit festivals are exempt, so there's no requirement for vendors at those festivals to have a Bothell business license, so there's really no regulatory angle for us to approve or deny their application. Similarly, for special events, that code allows the organizer of the event to essentially get the permit with the city, and then but the vendors participating in that event don't individually have to get business licenses or any permits from the city. So those are two instances where food trucks
okay.
are allowed.
One last question. So I think this amendment indicates that we would require a health permit, which actually is received from the county.
Yes.
And food handler's license, those types of things all come from the county. A business license. So
business license comes from the city. So
you're right.
Yeah,
so,
that's the. Yeah.
So do we see that being? How do we supervise that or oversee that? Is that going to require additional staff time, or how do we confirm? I mean, I don't know. If we were inundated with these things, are we going to have somebody out there checking to make sure they have all their permits and things?
Well, we would have to. It would take some staff time just for the review. With the business permit application, that would get routed to a planner, and if necessary, if they're asking for public area use permit, that would be reviewed by Public Works staff. But in terms of inspecting the food trucks and making sure that they're operating under the the rules of the state and the county, that's up to the county inspectors, and they do inspect those. And the regulations are quite thorough. They require them to submit a plan of where they're going to be located. If they're moving around to multiple locations, they need to have their itinerary so that they can check up on them.
Your questions, Councilmember Sandberg?
Did you say that you brought a table or something that showed some of the changes that you were thinking about incorporating based on some of the testimony we received? Did I hear you say that?
I brought the proposed code language that's in your packet with a couple of changes potential changes based on the comments.
Can you show those to us? Thanks. Because when I look at the 6 letters, it looks like there's one proposed change, which is allowing vendor trucks within 100 feet with permission from a brick and mortar restaurant, and then there was some discussion about whether it needed to be notarized or not. So that was the one change I saw.
And a vendor raised an objection to the requirement that that the written permission from the property owner, if they're on private property, be notarized, and made the point that in his experience, other jurisdictions either will accept the contract that vendor has with the property owner or an email from the property owner.
Which seems reasonable.
So that would, I haven't actually made that change here, but if council felt that was appropriate, we could just strike the notarized from this portion and just require written permission. So that's the first change. This is on page 2 of the code amendments. And the second change is the one that University of Washington Bothell suggested, allowing vendor trucks to be placed closer than 100 feet to an existing eating establishment if the owner of that establishment provides the cart with notarized written permission. And again, whether we want to require that to be notarized is something that is an open question. If we strike it from the first place, this is probably a more unusual situation, so it wouldn't be quite as much of a burden for a typical food truck operator, but I do know in my research with other jurisdictions, there are situations in other jurisdictions where, for example, a bar that has limited food options will actually contract with a food truck to park right outside so that their patrons have some eating options as well.
Sorry, what was the distinction between this written permission here? This one's placed closer than 100 feet, and what was the written permission?
That was for any food truck on any private parcel. So,
gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And then things like trash and restroom facilities, those sorts of things are all things that would be regulated by the health department and not by the city. And
they require a written contract with with a property owner, an agreement that they provide the restroom facilities within 200 feet. The food trucks themselves have to have hand washing sinks for the operators. I did get a little more information today about the trash receptacles. Those are required by state law, and they're required to be rodent-proof, rat-proof, and so they're part of the health department review of the food trucks.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting. Anybody else? Questions? Councilmember Rayam.
So, Dave, I was on the Planning Commission when this came up some time ago, and we did have a lot of public testimony, not in writing, but they came to the meeting and spoke in opposition, actually, of allowing food trucks, and they were brick-and-mortar restaurants that came in. Do you not recall? You mentioned earlier that nobody came in and spoke in opposition to the Planning Commission on this.
Yeah, I went back and checked the public record. The approved Planning Commission findings didn't list any public testimony. I do recall that you reported to Planning Commission that you'd spoken to some restaurateurs in the area that objected to them, but the record doesn't show any actual public testimony at the Planning Commission. We did get the email from the chamber, and one Main Street restaurateur was opposed to food trucks. Another member had some concerns, but another food establishment was pretty welcoming. And then more recently, I did met with the Downtown Action Committee and alerted them that this was coming to council, and the group that was there, including one downtown restaurant owner, were all supportive, as indicated in the chamber letter. So,
yeah, it seems drastic, the change in the chamber's position from June 2014 from the email that was sent in May 16, May 18th, 2011.
I don't know that they took a position last time. They polled their members and shared the responses they got. Yeah.
It says some are very supportive and feel that anything that brings additional business to town is a good thing, and some are adamantly opposed, feeling it would be a threat to their already struggling business.
Correct.
So, and then I was looking at the composition of the comments that we do have compiled here, and there isn't a lot of brick and mortar restaurants represented in this information. Have we done any outreach as the city to brick and mortar restaurants?
Not directly, beyond speaking with the Downtown Action Committee, and I have received an inquiry from one of the downtown restaurants that would like to operate a food truck out of their business and potentially sell at games at Popkini and construction sites around town. I was hoping that he would come and testify this evening, but when I apparently had a banquet tonight and wasn't able to make it.
Okay, those are all the questions I have.
Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Great, thank you. So, not allowing a food truck within 100 feet of another eating establishment, I see that. So, let's take a tavern that really doesn't, or bar that doesn't really serve food. And it's wedged in between two restaurants. All of a sudden, they can start serving food, and there's no impact, right? They can start serving food if they wanted to, a brick and mortar, right in between two other brick and mortars.
You mean a tavern could make arrangements to have a food truck?
No, they could start serving food in
a
tavern.
Yeah.
So how is that different than the tavern just contracting a food truck to do the same thing for them?
I don't know that it is.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to wrap my head around a brick and mortar business that, his expertise is brewing beer and serving beer, and that's all he wants to do. He doesn't want to get into food. He wants to bring a food truck in to take care of that part for him. So I see. I'm just trying to make sure that we're accommodating everybody equally and fairly. So I'm just looking for a reason why he couldn't do that on his parcel. I get if they're in the public right-of-way that, okay, you got to be 100 feet. But I'm trying to understand if I'm a business owner and I want to contract this person to provide food on my property, why is he subject to not being able to do that?
It's a good question, and it might. There are some potential tweaks to the code language that might help address that. The UW Bothell suggested language, which I inserted verbatim, doesn't address that particular situation where, and perhaps it should say all eating establishments within 100. They'll need permission from all eating establishments within 100 feet. Another option would be to only require it for all eating establishments that are open at the hours of proposed operation. So a tavern could have a food truck after the hours of the restaurants next
Right.
door.
I see that on the public right-of-way, but if I'm putting something on my property as a business owner, whether I choose to do it inside my building or in a truck or trailer in my parking lot, what's the difference? Why should I not be able to do that?
Well, that's a good point, and that would be another reason for making some changes in this language, if that's the sense of the council.
I fully support the changes that have been suggested, especially the not requiring the notary. But I would really like to be able to get, incorporate the ability of somebody that has a brick and mortar business and they want to put something on their property, not on the public right of way, on their property to provide food service. I don't think they should be restricted from that. If they could just as well start it on the inside of their building, I'm just not seeing a difference. So I don't want to restrict somebody from being able to do that when it's on their property. I understand on the public right of way, 100 feet. So if there's some way we could work that out, then I'd be pretty happy with it.
I could certainly work on some language to address that. I don't want to try to do it on
I'm not
on the
expecting
spot
you to do it
here
tonight. No,
but
I wouldn't do that to you.
Yeah.
But I would be supportive of something that allowed for that on private property to move forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
Dave, thanks for your presentation. Thanks to the public for your comments on this issue. I'm very supportive of food trucks, and I think part of the spirit of having competition in the free market is that vendors have the opportunity to compete with one another. I share a lot of the comments that Deputy Mayor Spivey made. I do have a couple discrete comments I'd like to go through. I agree with the removing of the notary requirement on that. I think that's unduly cumbersome. And I would like to come back and have an exploration to make this, to explore some of the points that Deputy Mayor Spivey directed or suggested, because I think that food trucks are actually a great trend in cuisine. They're something that's moving across America, and I think that I just went to a food truck the other day with my wife in the business park, and they're fantastic. They're really, really good. They bring great options to our city that we wouldn't otherwise have, and they provide a great variety for cuisine that enhances the quality of life in the city of Bothell. So I don't think we should be afraid. I don't think we should try to clamp down these things. I think we ought to encourage them. And I'm supportive of most of the changes, but what I would like to do is, I think the hour is getting a little bit late. I'd like to move that we extend the meeting until 9:45, but then sort of wrap up our comments and hopefully give you some clear direction to move forward and bring this back.
Second. So I have a comment. You're finished with your comments. So I'm looking at section 3, item B, citizen card, situated on private property, notarized for permission. I'm hoping that can be removed as well as regards to my responsible vendor truck shall not be placed closer to the existing structure or establishment unless given permission by that property owner. I wouldn't want to see the notarized requirement there. I have been looking through. Oh my goodness. I've been looking through, and I can't find it, Dave, regards to if like Riverfest is going on, permission to be able to have it, or having to gain permission. You say you don't have to if it's a nonprofit event. Is Riverfest a nonprofit event or no?
I believe it is, and under our, I think it's in Title 5, that is an exempt. It's exempt from business licensing.
Okay, so it's elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then I appreciate how you work with the University of Washington Bothell. What my concern would be is I want to put it into code so it's clear. So I look at item A, it talks about public area. I'd love to just put in language that says, but the campus is exempt, because they do have private streets. They maintain them themselves. It's not like City of Bothell's public streets. It's just codifying it.
Yeah.
That's my only comment. I think, do you want to speak to it? I think that's everybody has had an opportunity to speak to this matter. Yeah, Tris?
Yeah, I just asked some questions, but just general comments about, I support the changes that have been discussed up here, and I support food trucks in general. I think that people who regularly visit food trucks, and this is just from the few anecdotal stories that I've heard, spread their patronage to brick and mortar businesses, to food trucks. There are websites that advertise what food truck's going to be in what location, and people have their favorite food truck that they go to. And so I think that you're attracting more business, and it creates a synergy for everybody, food trucks and for brick and mortar. So I look forward to seeing the changes that you bring to us.
City Attorney.
Rising tides float.
Wondering, we prematurely shut down the public hearing, I believe. Do you think we should open it and re-advertise if this is coming back, just in case the public wants to make comment on what was discussed?
Well, you're required to hold a public hearing, which you've done.
Yeah.
Unless the legislation materially changes, there's no other obligation to hold further public hearings. You may allow public comment as much as you want going forward, but the public hearing itself requirement has been met, unless you were to completely blow things up and go in a completely different direction.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, that concludes this matter. Let me check our schedule here.
I believe there was an executive session.
We do have an executive session for personal matters requested by Councilmember Lamb. We are projected to go till about 9:45, and we don't expect to come back at this point.